Dwight D. Howard Foundation in 2004. The foundation provides scholarships for students who want to attend his alma mater, Southwest Atlanta Christian Academy. The foundation also organizes summer basketball camps for boys and girls.
Howard has only played less than 20 games for the LA Lakers so far, but is already making a name for himself in this city. In downtown, I'm Rasha Goel for LA This Week.
When it comes to keeping kids safe on the internet, police can't emphasize enough just what can happen if you trust the wrong person with your personal information. And they took that message to more than 400 local students recently. And as Anita Bennett reports, the kids received some sobering warnings about the dangers lurking online.
These students got the day off from school for a lesson on cybercrime.
Today, there's cyberbullying. Today, there's sexual exploitation. Today, there are things on the internet that can hurt you and hurt you badly.
The setting, the 4th annual Cybercrime Prevention Symposium. That's where law enforcement and child advocates warn students, teachers, and parents about the dangers of sharing too much information online.
When you enter a picture into the internet, it doesn't ever go away. It stays with you for the rest of your natural life. And that's what we're trying to impress upon you today is the idea that those pitfalls can be a little dangerous.
In September, Facebook announced 1 billion people a month now use the site. But experts warn not everyone you meet on social media websites has good intentions.
We all have friends, and you meet friends by talking to them. But the problem is, on the internet, when you meet somebody and you talk to them, you don't know who they are. You don't know who they are. You can't see them. And they could be somebody very, very bad.
And these experts advise students trusting strangers online could lead to dangerous and sometimes deadly consequences. I'm Anita Bennett for LA This Week.
Experts also urged parents to monitor how children use the internet and who they are interacting with online. The city is on its way to building 50 new parks, and one of those parks is in El Sereno. The mayor, councilmember Jose Huizar, and park officials recently led a behind-the-scenes tour of the community's newest park.
Donning miniature replicas of construction hard hats, the kids of El Sereno held hands and cheered with delight at the opening of a park that's been built just for them and their families, the El Sereno Arroyo Playground.
I know what it's like to grow up in a people-rich, park-poor neighborhood. And I know what a difference even the smallest park can make. Parks are part of the fabric of our communities, and every community deserves a safe, sustainable park.
Since the mayor took office more than 7 years ago, the city has added 660 acres of brand new park space, but he's not stopping there. The Department of Recreation and Parks is committed to building 50 more new parks in the next 3 years as part of what's called the 50 Parks Initiative, which targets the most park-poor areas of the city.
It is a very simple plan. Let's take this vacant land. Let's take foreclosed properties. Let's tear down these drug houses. Let's turn it into green space for you, the community, and you, the kids. And it's working.
The El Sereno Arroyo Playground at the corner of Alhambra Avenue and Concord Avenue is one of those 50 new parks the city is building. This neighborhood has among the county's highest percentage of residents ages 10 or younger. More than 4,000 children live within 1 mile of the project site.
What we see here today is about the spirit that the community of El Sereno represents. It's a spirit of never giving up.
It was that spirit that kept residents going in the fight to get a park built at the 1.3-acre lot owned by Caltrans that sat vacant for more than 30 years. Councilman Jose Huizar was finally able to garner a 25-year lease agreement between Caltrans and the City of LA Department of Recreation and Parks, paving the way to convert the site. While the 50 Parks initiative is well underway, when it comes to creating green space for families, in the mayor's own words, we're not done. We're never done.
So far, the 50 Parks Initiative has opened 3 parks, with 11 parks, including El Sereno, under construction. A family-owned grocery store chain that began in Southern California has now expanded to the Boyle Heights community. Cindy San Luis takes us to the grand opening of Northgate Gonzales Market.
LA Councilmember Jose Huizar joined Northgate Gonzales Market representatives to celebrate the grand opening of their newest location in Boyle Heights at 425 South Soto Street. The new market occupies what used to be a Super A food store.
We run our business that is based more in value than only price. So we thought that it was a good opportunity to come here and serve the people of Boyle Heights.
The market provides fresh produce, an extensive meat selection, a hot food deli, and more grocery choices. This location is only the second supermarket in this area of Boyle Heights. Councilmember Jose Huizar says this store is a great partnership for the area.
It's providing 72 new jobs for the local community, and they actually recruited from around the neighborhood.
Founded in 1980, Northgate Gonzalez Market is family-owned and operated. This Boyle Heights location marks the company's 37th store.
We have 13 brothers and sisters running the business, plus we have now around 20 nieces, nephews, sons also helping run the store, plus the 4,500 family members. That's how we consider our associates.
I have family in Anaheim, and they told me that they have really good specials. So I will say, well, let's try it.
The market caters to the Latino community and operates in Los Angeles, Orange, and San Diego counties.
It's great, good food and everything, so it's a good thing they opened a store nearby.
And the new store is happy to service its customers. Northgate Gonzalez Market is open from 6 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. 7 days a week. From Boyle Heights, I'm Cindy San Luis for LA This Week.
A man remembered for his work on behalf of senior citizens is honored at an annual event, and this year he was remembered with the special musical tribute of sorts. Just hang up, that's the message behind this musical number performed on Claude Pepper Day. Each year, the Claude Pepper Senior Center hosts a celebration to honor the life and legacy of Claude Pepper, a staunch advocate for seniors during 41 years in Congress.
Made enormous contributions to the passage of Medicare and Medicaid in 1965, and authored the Age Discrimination Act and Discrimination Against the Aged in Employment Act, and was a tireless fighter.
The Senior Center in Crescent Heights was named after Pepper shortly after his death in 1989. Los Angeles has a new job training center in the San Fernando Valley. The facility is meant to help put young people in the state prison system on the path to a brighter future. Anita Bennett reports.
1, 2, 3.
Los Angeles leaders, including City Councilman Richard Alarcon, who represents this area, were among the first to tour the new Job Training and Opportunity Center in Pacoima.
This building is a commitment to the future, and that says that we recognize that we have more challenges coming. But now that we have this infrastructure in place, let's not let it die.
The facility will house caseworkers from the nonprofit group Community in Schools and workers from the probation department. The goal is to give young people on probation the tools to learn new skills.
We give up on some of these kids just too quickly, too easily, and don't commit ourselves to doing what we can to creating another path.
But that's changing with the Job Center, which was built on land donated by the county.
It's not a very fancy building, but it's a very functional building. And it's not important what the building looks like, although it looks pretty good. It's what's going to go on inside and the kinds of successes that are going to be produced inside that building.
The 5,000 square foot facility has a computer room and several other classrooms. It was once a mule farm for the county fire department, but the building is now a beacon of hope for at-risk young people. I'm Anita Bennett for LA This Week.
The $1.2 million center was made possible with financial help from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Councilwoman Jan Perry helped mark the 20th anniversary of the California Charter Schools Association at City Hall. Charter school educators were on hand for the special recognition of the milestone. This year, LA County had the largest charter school growth ever with 40 new schools. The mission of charter schools is to give parents and students high-quality public education with more academic choices.
Today, charter schools account for the education of nearly 110,000 students in nearly every community across Los Angeles. For over 20 years, These schools have collectively helped close the achievement gap and successfully graduated students ready to succeed in college and in life.
The California Charter Schools Association serves more than 1,000 schools and close to 500,000 students throughout California. A pension reform measure falls short of making it onto the May ballot, a victory for residents as the city rezones 20 acres of land as open space, and the mayor creates a cabinet focused on LA's transportation priorities. These stories and more in City Beat.
Former LA Mayor Richard Riordan has scrapped efforts to get a measure on the May 21st ballot that would overhaul the city's pension system. Riordan's plan would move new city hires to 401k-style retirement accounts they would have to contribute to instead of the current pension system. The plan was met with fierce resistance and criticism from city employee unions. Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa also said Riordan's pension reform plan went too far. Riordan's Save Los Angeles campaign gave up on getting the measure on the May ballot after determining it could not meet a self-imposed December 28th deadline to collect the needed petition signatures. One of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives since 2009, Jose Joe Luis Sens, was arrested Thanksgiving following a joint operation with the Mexican government. The 37-year-old was wanted in connection with 3 murders, that of 2 gang rivals and that of his own girlfriend, whom authorities say threatened to turn him in for the gang killings. Sens was returned from Guadalajara, Mexico to Los Angeles Thanksgiving weekend under FBI escort. The LA City Council has voted to rezone 57 parcels of land on Elephant Hill in El Sereno as open space. The ordinance, introduced by Councilman Jose Huizar, guarantees protection of 20 acres of land that the community fought to protect. In November of 2009, the City Council voted to settle with the developer and purchase the land outright, ending more than 2 decades of struggle. The City Council later voted to sell 5 acres of the land to the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, or MRCA, which is going to create a walking trail on site for visitors. Now that the land has been rezoned, the purchase can be finalized with the MRCA. Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa has issued an executive order calling on the city's general managers to create the Los Angeles Transit Corridors Cabinet, or TCC. TCC will serve as a central entity to ensure all city departments and agencies coordinate their efforts to bring about a more transit-oriented Los Angeles. In a statement released by his office, the mayor says the goal is to provide Angelenos of all income levels access to quality transportation, housing, and job opportunities.
Art at Olvera Street is nothing new, but this art is finally seeing the light of day after decades in the dark. Ana Marcos takes us to the America Tropical Festival to see what it's all about.
It's a folksy festival in honor of a folksy Mexican artist. The family-friendly gathering at Olvera Street helps to honor the unveiling of artist David Alfaro Siqueiros' masterpiece, America Tropical.
America Tropical was painted by David Alfaro Siqueiros to show the world that Los Angeles in the United States was the equal opportunity place in the world, except that at that time in space in history, the Mexicano and the Chicano and the Mexican American did not have those opportunities in this country.
Siqueiros' artwork often dealt with the plight of Mexico's working poor. He helped start Mexico's muralist movement, then came to America and painted America Tropical in Olvera Street in 1932. The mural, depicting an eagle and a Mexican tied to a cross with vines, was whitewashed and criticized for its political and social message. It was later uncovered and conserved by the Getty Conservation Institute.
The original one has the gold coming out of the beak, converting to a vine, and then getting the Mexicano y lo amarra. They don't let us grow. They don't let us create. So that's what he depicted.
Now visitors to Olvera Street can see the work that was kept from public view for so long and wonder at how far America has come in achieving equality for all and how far it still has to go. I'm Ana Marcos for LA This Week.
The event was produced by Community Arts Resources for the Getty Conservation Institute, a program aimed at engaging communities with culture and art. And in this week's list of things to do, a casino night themed holiday party that's for a good cause, a free dance performance at a local library, and a nature walk along the LA River. The Los Angeles Fire Department is hosting what it's calling the most wonderful time of the year party on Thursday, December 6th at the Exchange LA, located at 618 South Spring Street. Doors open at 6 p.m. The event benefits ABC7's Sparks of Love toy drive and is a 21 and over event with cocktails and appetizers. There will also be a casino night and prizes to be raffled off. All you have to do is bring a $20 donation or an unwrapped toy valued at $20. For ticket information, call 213-978-3649. Bonita Bikes Dance Art presents an interactive dance performance on Saturday, December 8th at 2 p.m. at the Lakeview Terrace Library at 12002 Osborne Street in Sylmar. Adults, children, and seniors will enjoy discovering the beauty and power of dance. This is a free performance supported in part by a grant from the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. For more information, call 818-353-5734. And if you're looking to connect with nature, take a nature walk along the LA River on Saturday, December 8th from 3 to 4 p.m. You'll get to look for local birds, discover native plants, and enjoy a relaxing afternoon in the great outdoors. The free program that's suitable for the young and old is sponsored by the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and presented by the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. Meet at Marsh Park, located at 2960 Marsh Street in Elysian Valley. For details, call 213-250-1100. And that's a look at some upcoming things to do. It's the kind of party that gives Sherman Oaks residents a good time while helping to support local businesses as well. Anna Marcos has the highlights from this year's Sherman Oaks Street Fair.
It calls itself LA's largest block party, and it just might be. Each year, blocks and blocks of businesses in Sherman Oaks open up the street for a big all-day party. The bash builds community spirit as well as economic activity.
This is a great fair. I've already walked several blocks, Bob, and this is what a community is all about. Participation.
This year, thanks to redistricting, the area has a new council member. Councilmember Tom LaBonge is no newcomer to the city, but this is his first gig as Grand Marshal for the event. And this is how he broke the ice.
I only dated girls from Van Nuys. I never got to date a girl from Sherman Oaks.
He may not have dated Sherman Oaks girls, but Tom LaBonge is honoring its top teachers with Teacher of the Year awards.
It's a great honor for all the hard work that myself and all teachers do to be recognized for our love and our passion for children.
Highland dancing, anyone? But if the Highland fling wasn't your style, how about a stress test? Plenty of businesses were marketing their wares on the sidewalk, and the kids seemed to really enjoy this critter corner, with everything from slow-moving tortoises to man's best friend.
Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore.
A little crooning as you ate your favorite meal didn't hurt, and then there was that bungee jump to help you work it off. These Sherman Oaks partiers plan to do it again next year. I'm Anna Marcos for LA This Week.
The community event also helps to support local schools. And that's going to do it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ellen Chang. A reminder that you could catch us online at lacityview.org. You can also follow and like us on Facebook. We'll see you back here next week for more of LA This Week.
Did you know that more than 80% of false alarms are related to preventable user errors, such as open windows or pets? Any motion can trigger an alarm. Thousands of police patrol hours are wasted investigating alarm reports that turn out to be false alarms. That's crime-fighting time lost. Make sure your alarm is working properly.
Hi, I'm Craig Irwin in Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Trenton Irwin, and you're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
Rosendahl, Zine, Wesson, Timmer is present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay, first order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
Labange moves. Weezer seconds. Next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Okay, Cardenas moves. Alacon seconds.
Mr. President, today is Tuesday, and now would be the time for the flag salute.
Okay, if I could ask everyone to rise for the salute of our flag. And Mr. Labange, would you lead us in our flag salute?
As we all rise in the John Farrell Chambers on this day, place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, why don't we go through the agenda at this time?
Item 1, Arlene's notice for public hearing. The Department of Building and Safety reports that the lien amount for item 1A may be reduced to $429.30 due to the receipt of partial payment. Also, item 1B may be received and filed inasmuch as the lien has been paid.
Okay, without objection on those items. Mr. Zine.
1A put on hold, please. We have some information. 1A put on hold, please.
Okay, 1A. Let's hold that.
Thank you.
Per Mr. Zine's request. Do we have any cards?
Yes, for item 1, yes.
Okay, so let's just hold the item. Let's move to the next section of our agenda.
Items 2 through 12 are items for which public hearings have been held. There's a request to continue item 2 to February 5th and to continue item 5 to January 23rd.
Okay, without objection. Specials members, 2 through 12. Okay, let's, Mr. Garcetti.
Continue item number 4 for 30 days, please.
Madam Clerk, what would be the exact date?
January 4th.
Okay, then without objection, we will continue that item. Okay, let's prepare to vote on the remaining items. Madam Clerk, open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, let's go to the next section.
Items 13 through 28 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes required for consideration.
Okay, without objection, those items are now before us. We will hold items, I believe, 19 and 20.
Yes, please, 19 and 20.
Mr. Oh, that was it. Okay. Cards?
Cards on items 16, 19, 20, and 25.
Okay, let's hold those items. Mr. Garcetti?
Number 18, please.
Item 18, hold for Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Cardenas? 23. We'll hold. Okay, let's prepare to vote on the remaining items. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That brings us where, Madam Clerk?
Items 29 through 31 are closed session items. Do you wish to hold them on the desk?
Now, I wish to defer to Mr. Krikorian first, where it relates to those two items. What are your recommendations, sir?
Thank you, Mr. President. There's 3 items on the closed session agenda today. Item 29 should be held on the desk for now, please. And then 30 and 31 can be disposed of in open session unless members have questions or concerns.
Okay, so let's hold item 29. Item 29 will hold. We can vote on the other 2 items. Do we have any cards?
No cards.
Okay, then if you could read those, what those items will do, and then we can prepare to vote on them.
For item 30, the recommendation is to authorize the city attorney to expend a total of for a settlement in the amount of $575,000. And for item number 31, the recommendation is to reject the plaintiff's offer of settlement.
Okay, we will vote on these items together. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, where does that bring us, Madam Clerk?
Mr. President, that takes council to items called special or general public comment.
Okay. Well, we'll hold off a bit on general public comment, but I would hope that there's a member of this council that will be able to introduce this group of beautiful young ladies that have just entered the council chambers, dressed handsomely and great smiles. I have a feeling that they are future leaders of tomorrow. I just don't know who the heck you are. So can somebody please help your poor president? Mr. Labange, can you help me?
I could help you. I took the courtesy moment that we have Washington Prep and Crenshaw Prep very special. And I want to ask Legacy ladies who are here, please stand right now and be recognized by the City Council. And I'm going to ask you to come right now. This is your moment. Wait right here. Tell me your name.
My name is Deja Turner, and I'm a student at Crenshaw High School.
And tell a little about the program.
I'm part of the Legacy Ladies Schoolhouse to the White House Leadership Program. It's a program to just help support us and give us more experience to meet with people like you.
Oh, that's very good. And introduce your leaders right here, your teachers and educators and mentors.
Oh, back here we have Lady Jackie, and she's the president of Legacy Ladies, and that's Lady Castillo from Washington Prep High School.
So 2 great schools in Los Angeles are stepping up and making a big difference. And on behalf of Miss Perry, she's on her way, and you'll be reintroduced again, so you get a 2-for-1 today when Miss Perry comes.
Okay, they will get a 2-for-1.
Thank you.
Anyway, let's give them another round of applause. And again, welcome to your Los Angeles City Council chambers. Mr. Zine, you want to move forward with item 1? Or do you want me to take up a few?
Let's continue it for a week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wait, all of item 1 or just?
1A.
Okay, Mr. Zine requests that item 1A be continued for 1 week, which will bring us to when,
Next week.
Madam Clerk?
Next week.
No, but she has to say for the record the exact date.
1 week would be December 11th, next Tuesday.
That's fine.
Okay. Without objection, 1A continued for 1 week to December 11th. Okay, now let's go to item 16, called special by our dear friend. Mr. Murphy, are you still here? Sean, please come forward. This is item 16.
Good morning. Sean Murphy. Item 16 is a good item. I support it.
Thank you. There are no speakers on 16? Okay, just relax. So, Mr. Walsh, if you'd come forward. Mr. Dude, I do not have the cards, but fill one out and give it to me later. But you can come forward and speak on this issue.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. Haven't been here in 2 weeks. Go check out our latest post. Incidentally, there are no cards in the back. I guess you
Sergeants, could you please put cards in the back?
You know, saving. So, HollywoodHighlands.org, and the issue is number 16, transportation improvement mitigation projects. In fact, your little rail bus system is much better run than the MTA's bus system. However, we don't need consulting services, and subject to the approval of the city attorney and legal compliance with contracting requirements, I don't think this organization, TIMP, or is that PIMP? No, it's TIMP, Transportation Improvement Mitigation Projects. I don't think you need the consultants. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Mr. Dude?
Yes, they call me Dollhouse Dude. I'm representing Macho Camacho. He got killed for cocaine, which kind of tells you that the war on drugs is not working. Anyway, yeah, just do it. No more red tape. You don't need to spend money on red tape. Build transportation without consulting anybody. Consult the people themselves and don't charge them for that. Do not go spending money on consultations. Lawyers are stupid. Thank you.
Riveting. Okay, let's prepare to vote on that item. Madam Clerk, if you could open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Let's go to item 25. And that was called special by cards. Mr. Walsh, item 25.
John Walsh, blogging at Hollywood Highlands, HIGHLANDS.org. 1.4 million requests since October 2011. This is item number 25. It is an important item for your consideration, and this concerns tract maps. Tract maps have to do with zoning. And we approve of all of the tract maps, and we ask you to stay tuned, because you're going to see something like you never saw before. You're going to see an attempt to roast the most proud people in the world.
He is not talking about this item.
Of LAFD. We are behind you. We are not going to allow you to be wrong.
Okay, Madam Clerk, let's prepare to vote on that item. If we could open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, Ms. Perry, it's my understanding that you have some very special guests with us today. Mr. Labange briefly introduced them to us, but I think you might want to take over for Mr. Labange.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want to recognize the president of the founder of Legacy Ladies, Jackie Castillo, if you would stand up. This is an incredible group of young women who are being empowered and being led towards a better life, a better trajectory through education and self-esteem and self-advocacy, so they can contribute more to their respective communities and become significant women in our city and in our society. And this has all been the vision of Jackie Castillo as the founding mother of Legacy Ladies. And I really enjoy going to their annual dinner every year and to see the graduates and to see the ones who've already graduated and moved on to college and careers reach back and help these younger ladies move forward. So I'm really happy to see all of you here today and very proud of you too. And I'm glad that you spoke about them once. I'm happy to do it a second time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perry. And to the young ladies, you're looking at a great role model right there in Jan Perry. Give her a big hand there. Thank you. And I hope you visit the Tom Bradley Tower later on and observe the great city of Los Angeles. Hail, hail, Washington Prep and Crenshaw. Good job. Next, Madam Clerk, I'd like to call public comment so that we could handle that at this point here. Sean Murphy, Donna Perlman, John Walsh.
Yes, good morning. For the new year, I'd like the libraries open, police department continue to be run, and our firefighters to be run. And also, I'm going to be choir soon a concert. Mr. Rosenthal, I'm going to be in your area Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Donna Perriman. Hey, tell everybody they should come sooner than boy.
We need to reopen Van Nuys video conferencing. Jan Perry, Eric Garcetti, and even Wendy Gruhl. You'll need the Valley vote, and you need to have the Valley video conferencing open so that people can go over there and tell you their concerns when you become mayor. I'm in a lot of pain in the back and the hip. It was extremely hard to take the 2-hour bus trip by bus. It was hard getting on and off, and I had to lay against my purse because the bus triggered my back spasms. You're not right to the disabled elderly and those with illnesses like cancer survivors. And Marion was in great pain for more than a week. pain everywhere and had hard trouble walking, and she got very tired. And it was even hard driving from the subway station back to where she lives. So it's no excuses to open up Van Nuys video conferencing. Now, Proposition 30 gave huge pay increases to all the CSU presidents. With the sales tax, you'll give Reardon businesses like the car dealerships to get tax credits or pay no gross receipt tax exemptions, which will probably make permanent. Why should the fairest sales tax bail you out? Vote no. Cut politicians' pay and their pensions at the city council at least 50%. The revenue we lose to the gross receipt tax on offset will be made up with the city sales tax. Your car repeal and you can repeal and rescind laws as well as make them. CRA is getting money because of Proposition 30. The car dealers and other businesses lose money due to higher sales tax, especially sales tax, city sales tax. People will shop outside of Los Angeles, so in the long run, we won't get anything. The city repeals sales taxes for cops, privatization, the zoo, and convention center. But
thank you very much, Mr. Walsh, followed by Mr. Dude. Thank you.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org, or go to frontpageonline.com. Front Page Online, you'll see a lot of my stuff there. Okay, the mayor got shot down by Obama yesterday. The mayor of this city started a rumor that he was firing Debbie Wasserman Schultz and was going to give the DNC chairmanship to Antonio. The President of the United States tweeted to shoot that down. It was a dirty, rotten, planted lie. He's finished on June 30th. We'll never have to see him again in politics. Okay, the number one story, the closing of Cirque du Soleil's Irish show. A loss of $100 million, the biggest theatrical flop in the history of the planet. The second biggest is about $15 million. And $30 million of that was a loan. And contrary to what the LA Times says, it was not a city loan. It was a federal stimulus Obama loan that passed through here for $30 million based on the Cirque du Soleil show lasting for 10 years. It was brought through by Garcetti. Garcetti was the father of that loan, and the show closed 8.5 years earlier. It produced no jobs. That $30 million of federal stimulus money could have been spent on building low-cost housing. Instead, it went to the Sim Corporation. Instead, went someone who now supports Garcetti. Anybody but Iris Garcetti is his new name. That's the name of the show. From now on, your name is not Eric. Your name is Iris Garcetti. You wasted $100 million at the Oscar Cast Theater at Hollywood and Highland. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Mr. Dude.
You're wasting money and you're wasting my time. My time is more important than your time, because I'm telling you, there is a way to provide housing for everyone, but nobody seems to be listening. They're all interested in throwing the money into the red tape arena. Red tape arena. Cirque du Soleil. I didn't even know that, but I'm not surprised. All I hear you say, where did this million go? Where did that billion go? Where did the other billion go? And everybody's homeless. Excuse me, we need to address first things first. Everybody needs a domicile, a place to live. From there they can work and pay you taxes. What are you going to do with the taxes? You're going to waste them anyway. What's the difference? Okay, so we're talking about a lot of money. What is money? It's just an idea. How many bills are printed every day and the presses are running constantly? It's just an idea. But why don't we distribute the idea a little more evenly so you don't have people sleeping on the street, getting rained upon, 7 days and 7 nights, as they did just recently. Hello? LeBonge, what the hell are you doing over there? What are you doing? Talking about something else more important? No, housing is more important. Pay attention. We need to change the direction into which every city hall is going. City Hall is not here to fight against the people. City Hall is here to help the people. So help us all.
Okay, next item. We'll conclude our public comment. We thank the public for their comment. Next item would be item 18, and we have a public comment card from Mr. John Walsh, I believe, as well as Sean Murphy. Mr. Walsh, item 18. Mr. Murphy. Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Item 18 is a good item. I support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy.
What was he, filibustering? Took so long. HollywoodHighlands.org. 2 weeks ago, I spoke here in the county. 10,000 visitors. 10,000 visitors. This concerns the registry of bone and marrow donors. We believe this is 100% important. And fortunately, we don't need that many bone and marrow donors because the city of Los Angeles has fewer people injured in fires per capita than any city in America because we have the best fire department on the planet. Do not try to roast them today. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Thank you. And Mr. Garcetti, I believe you call this one special, and I know of your work and interest in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. LaBonge. And today, colleagues, I ask that we join together to look at the feasibility of establishing a city employee registry of blood and bone marrow donors. We have one of the largest employer bases of any institution, company, entity in the city. And as we know, so many of the most tragic diseases that we have really can only be treated when we find a bone marrow match. And the Personnel Department is going to investigate establishing a process for employees to voluntarily participate in a blood and bone marrow registry maintained by the Personnel Department. American Red Cross states that 80% of their donated blood from blood drives and mobile events is what they obtain. But every year, approximately 20,000 people who need a bone marrow transplant, only 30% of them find a match. We've had some very compelling speakers come here before, talk about the loss of their family members due to the lack of a match. My own father had lymphoma and others who have been afflicted with diseases that can be treated. And we've had initiatives been done by other people. Mr. Weiss did it before. I believe there's some others that have looked at trying to help with some of the nonprofits that are out there. But this would institutionalize it for all city employees. So hopefully we can look at what we can do to make that happen. I appreciate the Personnel Department's good work on this. We look forward to hearing back and seeing what we can do to literally save lives for the 40,000 city employees that we have who right now are a match for people out there who need us. So I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Dude, your card is here. Thank you.
Yes, I know that it is important to live to fight another day. But unless we know what we're fighting for, you know, we could all die today and not have made a difference. So let's find some items that are important, and everybody should donate their bone marrow, whether it's good or not. We'll have a bone marrow bank. Why not? You know, bank of bone marrow.
Hello, Ms. Pearman. I need you to fill out a card, so I'm going to let you speak. I'll let you speak, then fill out a card for me, please. Go ahead, Donna Pearman.
I very much believing in having bone marrow, and also to have the hospitals to have plenty of blood available, because I lost a good friend of mine who is age 55, Lorraine Ravitz, because they didn't have readily enough they didn't give her a blood transfusion. I think that might have saved her life when they goofed up on her surgery. And so I'm very much for having blood available and bone marrow. So thank you very much for this.
Okay, now don't forget there's cards in the back now, Ms. Pearman, if you could fill one out.
Adjourn in Lorraine's Rabbit's memory.
Oh, okay, just fill out a card. All right, let's prepare to vote on this item. If we can open up the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas, we have item 23. Is Mr. Cardenas? In fact, Mr. Cardenas, before you speak on item 23, I just want to remind the council that on the 14th of this month, we will be thanking you for your service to the city and wishing you good luck in the future. But I don't know if...
List of projects?
I don't know. Yeah, of course, you know it was no surprise. And I don't know if people know exactly what that future is. But members, I think Mr. Cardenas may have a future in acting. Over the Thanksgiving Day holiday, I did view him on national television with Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, and there was a march on Washington, D.C., and all of these people were marching on D.C. with their dogs, and Mr. Cardenas was marching dogless, but he marched anyway. So, Mr. Krikorian, before we get to Mr. Cardenas, your name was on the queue.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just wanted to ask that we continue item 29 for 1 week, please.
Okay, so item 29 will be continued for 1 week. I believe that is December 11th. So without objection, Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could ask that item 15 be sent forthwith, please.
Without objection. Okay, so now if we can go to item 3 with our up-and-coming leading man, Mr. Cardenas. Item 23. You're not going to change your name. You're not going to have an acting name, are you?
No.
Just like one name, Tone.
I'll stay with the same name. Thank you. At least so far. Thank you very much, Mr. President. On item number 23, I wanted to pull it up because I want to make a technical change here. And in the document, it reads New Environmental Arts Center at the Southeast Valley Skate Park. So strike New Environmental Arts Center at Southeast Valley Skate Park, and then insert New Environmental Arts Center in Council District 6, serving the residents of Sun Valley. And I'll give this to the clerk.
Okay. So, but we can do that verbally, correct?
Yes.
All right. I do have one card on 23, Dow House Dude.
Yes, Senor Cárdenas, it is now popular to be Latino and be in the media. It used to be, remember Ricardo Valenzuela? You know what his name was? Richie Valens. He had to change the name because it was not popular to be Latino. Anyway, what are we talking about?
Item 23.
Oh, yeah. Relative to funding of the various community projects and needs for the residents nearby Bradley, landfill. Well, we do need housing, don't we? But we need to know the right way to do housing. We need to provide permanent housing for everyone so that everybody is working and paying taxes, and that we fix the streets, not like you do now. You don't fix the streets. I can tell you, I've been riding those streets on my bike for several years. You do not fix them. The holes get bigger and bigger, and you charge more and more on your parking meters. You see? So we don't need no red tape. We need reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote. vote?
11 ayes.
Okay, let's go back to item number 1. We still have some cards on 1. John Walsh and Sean, come forward. Mr. Walsh passes. Sean Murphy.
Yes, item 1, I'm against all liens. Thank you.
Mr. President, for item 1B, the request is to receive and file this item inasmuch as the lien has been paid.
All right, then. So we can do that just without objection. Okay, so now let's move to our next item.
Next item is items 19 and 20. Call special for cards and for members.
Okay, Mr. Englander. It's my understanding, do we have the ETA on the fire chief? Because these two items are our last items of business on today's agenda.
Well, if he's not here, he was scheduled to be here. Then I would assume we continue the items until tomorrow, until he's available to show up. I don't know why he's not here. I know they had a commission meeting, but he was scheduled to be here.
Yeah, it's my understanding there is a fire commission meeting.
Yeah.
But Mr. Garcetti?
Can we get word from the department about what his expectation is or where he is? He's on his way?
Okay, if I could get somebody from the
announcements.
police department to fire department to come down, and I don't understand what he's on his way means.
What's his
Is he
ETA?
on
Do we
his
have a
way
time?
from Malibu? Is he on his way from around the corner?
From the fire commission.
He's running late again?
Good to see you, sir.
I'm Dan McCarthy, Assistant Chief. He's on his way from his headquarters office, sir. He should be here within 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, why don't we...
Correct.
I'm sure there are other members of the department that are going to sit up here with the chief. Why don't you guys get situated, or...
I believe they're coming with him, sir.
Oh, okay, so he's bringing a separate team to do that. Okay, I have some cards on that item, so maybe we take the cards and let's see if we can't stay busy until he gets here. Mr. Walsh, you want to speak on this one, or do you want to pass? After that, the new president of UFLAC, Frank Lima. John Walsh, HollywoodHighland.org.
You know, you have a nerve. He's 3 minutes late. The meeting started 20 minutes late. The man has a job. I'm tired of an African American being, as a white man, being treated as a scapegoat. And that's what the chief... There are almost no complaints about the fire department. The only problem is that you politicians, including the mayor, cut the budget, and then you expected the fire chief to be Mandrake the magician and get something out of nothing. And you're harassing him over response times when the response times in this city are better than any other city in America. You should be thanking him instead of putting him on the hot seat and grilling him and hoping to burn him the way that witches were burned in the Middle Ages. Cummings has done a great job. Where are the public members attacking him? Nobody except the mayor, the craven mayor. You have done a fantastic job. Thank you very much for the fire department. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Again, President Lima, Frank Lima.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. President, Honorable Council. Yeah, first of all, on item 19, I'd like to thank Councilmember Rosendahl, Labange, and Perry for making this motion, bringing it up to our attention. My name is Frank Lima. I'm the new president of United Firefighters of Los Angeles City. I'm very humbled to be here. And comments I'm going to make which are not mean-spirited. Our membership is unified and in alignment with this council right now in that we're looking for a more assertive fire chief. Our confidence in the fire chief is no lie, no secret that it has gone down. and some members of his staff as well. We're trying to step this up for public safety and firefighter safety. This is what this is all about. First of all, I'd like to thank our new Fire Commissioner, Scobin, members of the task force, Assistant Chief Butler, for their work on the task force. The fire department's over and over incorrect data to support an ill-conceived deployment plan, which you voted on last year. And response times are very easy. When you cut 20% of a fire department, it's very common sense that it takes firefighters and paramedics longer to get there. We appreciate the council taking a leadership role to take control of the fire department. The council was sold a bill of goods when you guys voted to cut the resources. UFLAC on item B. UFLAC has been asking the fire department to work with our International Association of Firefighters with the GIS, and this is another example where our management has chosen to not work with labor. In regards to the computer-aided dispatch system and the breakdowns there, the only way that we continue, may I have just a few extra minutes, Mr. President?
Since you are newly elected,
Thank you,
I'll
sir.
give you an extra minute.
Thank you. And with the breakdowns of the communication center of our computer-aided dispatch, the only way we continue to operate as firefighters is that our firefighters are at that dispatch center, and it's with their expertise, their experience. They provide a service that non-sworn personnel could never provide. The public and firefighters continue to be at risk as a result of this deployment plan. The fire chief and some of his staff have made disappointing comments recently in the LA Times, which this is about, and basically has made a mockery of this situation. Comments such as, we would like a station on every corner, and if you want to be safe, live next to a hospital. That's not the answer. We just need the stations that we have to be properly staffed. Local 112 continues to serve the public, where it's not about the hard work of our firefighters and their day-to-day operations. They're stretched thin. They're working with limited resources, and they never complain. We're here to work with city leaders today, and we're glad to be on the same page as you. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you would stay around, there may be a question for you later. So, Chief, welcome. Please come forward. We understand that you were at a Fire Commission meeting that went a little long, but we appreciate your presence. And so we'll start off, though, with Mr. Englander, then we'll move to Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Council President. Chief, the predicament before us today is a recurrent and persistent problem. Since we entered the Great Recession, old problems and efficiencies that have lingered in the fire department can no longer be ignored and must be addressed. LAFD's historic unwillingness to acknowledge and fix the deployment data issue is just another example of kicking the can down the road. Sadly, as evidenced by the 2002 controller audit, bad data isn't a new issue for LAFD. In fact, the controller's audit stated the very data being analyzed cannot be completely validated or verified by the department or anyone else because the LAFD uses an outdated, non-verifiable system to track response times. This lack of ability to verify information means the department, despite its genuine effort, cannot, with total accuracy, track and measure performance in a critical area of response times, and cannot use the data accurately as a basis for resource allocation and deployment. The Go Down report also stated the same findings, suggesting only 2 sworn employees who were assigned to the planning section are responsible for running the system, yet both employees assigned had no experience, training was limited, understanding of the data analysis process non-existent. The dilemma is that the department is faced with the critical necessity of restructuring daily operations, but according to the feeling of the public and the media, there isn't anyone with the vision or courage to take the necessary action to reinstill confidence in the community with the department. We need leaders within the department from the top down who are willing to step forward, acknowledge the substantive and unpleasant issues facing the department, and then get serious about the critical work of building an effective and efficient LAFD for the 21st century. Under the previous chief, and in furtherance of the new deployment plan estimated to have saved the city $200 million, LAFD in 2011 began the critical work of analyzing response times, projecting impacts that would result from the permanent reduction of 318 positions from the department. Unfortunately, in doing its response time analysis, the department used junk data that had never been cleaned up, which the department has been formally aware of since 2002. Under your leadership, Chief, LAFD designed a new deployment plan around it and sold this plan to the Council and to the people of LA. The foundation of this plan was built on unstable ground and continues to crumble before our eyes. The consequence of the fire department's inability and unwillingness to confidently and precisely address their data issues have left the people of Los Angeles feeling alienated and anxious about their safety. I have long felt that the task of building America's most advanced and efficient fire department is critical. Thus, in anticipation of questions with respect to the impacted response times, in February of this year I authored a motion requesting that the fire department implement a CompStat-style technology and management system of its own and bring clarity and consensus to LAFD data and reporting. The response that I got from the department, if you can believe it, was endless arguments about what it should be called, and then no action. It wasn't until Commissioner Scobin decided to focus on the issues that Command acted and convened the task force on information and data analysis. I'm delighted with the findings of the report, but I also wanted to share my frustration with trying to get the information on the report. As the chair of the Public Safety Committee and the author of the motion to begin the process, I had to find a copy of the final report from the media, not the department. To date, the report is not on the fire department's website. This is one of the most important reports to come out of the department and the commission. And while it's on the commission's agenda website through a link, it's not easily available to the public. In fact, I don't even believe it's been distributed to this body this morning. Chief Cummings, I consider you a good friend and a great firefighter. I will assume you will talk about the task force report this morning and get into some of the critical problems that have been identified and present those solutions and perhaps the price tag to initiate the process. While I know that you've inherited some of these problems, you are also in key leadership positions to correct these issues and to be forthright about the situation. Prior to becoming chief, you were assigned to the planning section of LAFD, where you were responsible for the management of the day-to-day functions, staffing, level studies, and formulation of the goals and objectives of the department. After that, you were promoted to assistant chief, where you were responsible for the planning and implementation of the short and long-term goals and objectives of the department. Therefore, before you get into the task force report, please explain why the situation was virtually ignored for years, then papered over with misinformation and bad data, and has now escalated into a major crisis and loss of faith by the public in one of the greatest fire departments in the nation. Thank you.
Mr. Bill Rosendahl.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Engler and Mr. Garcetti. We were all on the same wavelength when we put these motions in, because both of our areas are very concerned about getting an effective response to our issues. As you know, Chief, I was very upset and still am that a full engine company doesn't exist in the district, in the Palisades. And that's not because we have that many responses. I understand we don't. But when we do, it's a big deal. And to get equipment there is very difficult with the 405 widening and with the stuff going on PCH. So it's a difficult, isolated area. But I appreciate the fact that you told me every red flag day there would be an engine company there. And there has been. The only downside is some of the folks who were in the engine company didn't know where they were going for a fire. And the media was there first. And it took a while for us to get our apparatuses there. So that's an issue that I hope we will resolve as we go forward. But if I could just ask you if it's okay, if I could ask your deputy chief there that did an analysis and did a whole breakdown of where we are to give us an initial set of pictures. And I have some questions for him, if it's okay, Chief.
What I prefer to do is to make a statement and then to actually present the findings of that Information and Data Analysis Task Force report.
That's terrific.
If that'd be okay with
That'd be
the
great.
council here.
Sure.
And I want to thank also Councilman Englander for his statements. And before I start out, I also wanted to extend the thoughts and prayers of the fire department and my family to the family of Councilman Joe Buscaino, who suffered a loss. I'm sharing this report today out of a desire to provide accurate data to the public, the city council, and city government. It's extremely important that we use data as a tool to provide the highest level of public safety within the fiscal constraints placed on us by the city. A brief bit of historical context is necessary here in order to frame the issue and my response today. For the 2010-2011 budget, as requested by this council in response to a staggering $89 million in reductions in the Los Angeles Fire Department budget, this department put forward and this council approved a deployment plan that allowed us to end the rotational closures of 22 fire companies and 6 ambulances, and it let us reopen 2 of those ambulances, 3 fire engines, and 1 aerial ladder truck. So we put more firefighters in the street daily with that budget and that deployment plan. Additionally, we put more paramedics on more of our response units so that we could have that first paramedic on scene quicker. As that report, when it was given to council, stated, we continually monitor our performance, identifying opportunities for improvement and reporting back to the council with requests. We did so in the 2011-2012 budget, where we identified the need for an additional fire engine in the West Valley, 6 additional ambulances during the peak time of the day, and additional emergency medical supervision. An approval for that request was given, and so we have more firefighters in the street today than we did when we went into that deployment plan. And now, as part of the 2013 budget that was approved today through the Fire Commission, I am again identifying specific resource needs to improve the level of EMS service, to improve response times, and to continue providing exceptional public safety. I look forward to the council's continuing support of public safety and looking for that funding through the council-created Neighborhood Fire Service Fund. And for the IDA Task Force, I created this task force and am sharing this report as a step towards providing effective public safety in the city of Los Angeles as that all-risk life safety response provider. As a fire chief, I created this task force to look at how we capture, report, and analyze data. We brought together a very talented cross-functional team, both internally and externally, and I put Assistant Chief Pat Butler as my designee as the head of that team to move it forward. Some of the members on that team included our Metro Fire Communications Commander, Dan McCarthy. From his staff, Captain Yo Gickus and firefighter paramedic John Flores. From my own technology folks, my Director of Systems, Kurt Sato, Systems Analysts, James Wolf, and Oscar Barrera. From the city's Information Technology Agency, Ms. Stella Berryman, Balami Morcrane, and Andy Liu. From the Los Angeles Fire Department, we were able to borrow some very talented folks, Captain Sean Milanowski, also Dr. Sean Milanowski, and John Newman, both of them who were instrumental in doing the LAPD's CompStat, which is an excellent model as we look at this data analysis. We went external to the fire department when we were able to bring in doctors from RAND Corporation with Brian Chow, and also from USC, from their Information Sciences Institute, with Dr. Raji Maharesh and Yuan Chan. And then we worked with some of our current contractors, Palantir and First Watch, as we looked at how we capture that data, analyze it, and present it to the public. Very diverse group, both internal and external, so that we made sure that we had that diversity of opinions and diversity of viewpoints as we move forward. The Commission and I talked about it and agreed that Commissioner Alan Scobin would be their liaison to this task force, bringing with him his experience, 30 years as a reserve sheriff and 8 years on the police commission, where they had that fine CompStat system in effect. I received Chief Pat Butler's preliminary report from the IDA Task Force on November 2nd. And after reviewing and approved that report, I forwarded an electronic copy to my Fire Commission on the 6th of November. On October 8th, I prepared a board report embracing the report, and this is our path forward, and the full commission approved that report on November 22nd. That report was awaiting scheduling for Public Safety Committee and this full council as we were bringing it forward as part of our process. And I was bringing it to the council, and not in response to an article in the paper, but because of the council's role in providing support and funding for public safety. This is an important report. and the fire service across the country shifting that business model to one that's driven by the data, using the measurement of the inputs, outputs, and outcomes of how we respond, having that in a transparent manner, and then filtering that through the human judgment of my command staff is the way this organization is moving forward. My designee to provide leadership on the Information and Data Analysis Task Force was Assistant Chief Pat Butler, and now he'll go over the details of that IDA report for you.
Yes, Mr. Englander.
Chief, with all due respect, I only asked you one question. It was what did we do before we got into the task force, before we get into the report over the last 10 years. That's a report moving forward, and we're all very interested. I don't think it's been distributed here to the council. Has everybody gotten a copy of it? So we still have yet to see the report. I know you're going to go over it, but it hasn't been distributed to any members of the City Council here this morning. So if you can go through the history on how we got here first over the last 10 years.
Mr. Englander, maybe what we could do, I do have other speakers in the queue. I could call on a few of them while the report is being distributed. So with that said, Mr. Garcetti, followed by Mr. Labange.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief, and to the Commissioner and the command staff that is here. Thank you to Mr. Englander and Mr. Rosendahl as well. I think I want to also say at the outset, because these are difficult conversations to have, these are not personal conversations, and I agree with Mr. Englander. Like you as a person, Chief, I don't doubt at all your firefighting abilities, and it's not about one person either, but you are the Chief, just as we are council members, as we have a president here, as we have a mayor, and so that's the way that this works. I ask that you come here today to answer these questions because of my own frustrations about the pace, not just of where we've been in getting data, and I think that history is really important, but what we do moving forward. We need good data. That is clear. We need good management. That's a given. But we also need a good plan. And we don't need defensiveness. We don't need the pointing of fingers. I'm not here to say that 10 years was only your work. We have an entire department that has, for 10 years, had a controller's, under Controller Chick, I believe, controller report that laid out their problems that has not moved swiftly enough to solve those. We all saw a plan that was sold to us as, in difficult times, where we had to make difficult choices, making things better, and while it might have incrementally, it hasn't done enough. And you're not before an unsympathetic audience here. We've had these conversations privately as well as publicly. I created that line item of Neighborhood Fire Service Fund. We stopped the permanent elimination of 318 positions when that was put on the chopping block. And we have said that our first priority, 3 times we've passed in this, both in budget deliberations and in non-budget deliberations, that our first priority for restoration of funds is the fire department. It was the library and fire department. We knocked out the library needs. Given that, I want to see somebody stand up and fight for this department. I want to see somebody who says, as we bring in new dollars, don't take those dollars and put them in the general fund. Yes, you are part of a larger entity here, and you want to be a team player. But we want you to fight for the fire department. And I want a plan that, when we asked 6 months ago, doesn't, for a 5-year plan, if we wait another 6 months, it's only going to be a 4-year plan. We need action now, and we want to do what we can do to make those difficult decisions come budget time and during this budget year to be able to support you and help you. That's why you're here today, in my opinion, at least with the motion that I put forward. To do, yes, some forensic work, to look at the good work that we've done in terms of making sure that we have better data, but also to hear out there when we talk to firefighters why things still move too slowly, why where we've taken away entities and where there's not companies and ambulances, why we can't recode some of the computer programs to make sure that the closest stations respond to those calls, why there's a feeling that when things come from below, they're not bubbling up. We're not here to do a large management review. That's for the Commission to do, and actually trust my leaders to do their work. But I do ask 6 months later for the plan. I don't expect 20% over 5 years to be restored. It's not realistic. But I do expect forward momentum, and I do expect management who will fight for this department and then put it on us to make those decisions. So I'd like you to answer that today about what we're going to do, because we are here to make this a safer city today, and we need to see that leadership.
And Chief, before you respond, Mr. Garcetti, there will be a 19A today which will direct the CAO and the fire department to report back to us within 45 days on a 3 to 5 year restoration plan. So it will be part of the action that we take today. Chief, I can say that I do believe a lot of the problems is that the department is operating on baling wire and bubble gum, and that you need to have the resources to do the job, and we have a responsibility to provide the services to Angelinos. So that will be part of today's action, and I'm hoping that Mr. Garcetti will be part of that amendment to this today's action. So with that said, you can respond to Mr. Garcetti and then Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much, Council President. In response to that, a 5-year plan, when we currently now, with the IDA Task Force, we've identified the data issues that Councilman Englander so eloquently put forward, and we have a little over 2 months, almost 3 months now of accurate data, response time data, which it would be irresponsible to put forward a 5-year plan on such a small data set that we have. What we have been putting forward since I've been the fire chief is a plan for moving forward for the next year and identifying issues that we saw and move forward. We put together a budget request for an additional $40 million last fiscal year, the one we're in now, that this council approved. The package that we're putting forward for next fiscal year to identify those other opportunities for us is requesting close to $50 million in addition of resources, because that's how far ahead we can look now with the data that we have. 5 years from now, with the changes in the fire service here and how we provide service here in the city of Los Angeles, with community paramedicine, with the Affordable Care Act moving forward, the level of service that we provide and how we provide it in 2017 can possibly be radically different than it is right now. We're putting forward a plan, and we have put together a plan of what our priorities are moving forward. We've spoken about critical civilian support staff, about supporting technology, about making sure we have those inspectors in place to promote business. We've talked about adding additional EMS, additional ambulances to hit that EMS call load, which is 85% of our call load. We've given you the priorities that we have. I cannot tell you right now the specific places where those resources will go. As we get a 6-month data set, we'll have a better idea of some of the macro trends. As we get a 12-month data set moving forward, we'll be able to get down into those variations by time of day, day of week, and seasons of the year. And we're moving in that direction as quickly as the limited budget that we have. The simple answer is money. If you give us money, we'll have more technology, we'll have more civilian support staff, we'll have more resources in the field. You gave us a budget. We're giving you the most effective fire department we can within that budget. Are we challenged? Yes. Do we have fewer people than we had in 2008? Yes. Do we have a budget that's much smaller, like most of the city, than in 2008? Yes. We're giving you the best fire service that we can provide, given the resources that this council has provided for us.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much. Members, the history of this department, this service has rapidly changed over the last decades. In 1970, the Los Angeles Police Department, as recently as 1970, was responsible for transporting people. And basically, they picked them off the street, put them in a brown bomber, as they called it, and raced to a central receiving hospital somewhere in the city. Over these years, it's dramatically changed. How much is medical calls? How much is fire calls?
85% of our emergency call load, 85% of our call load is
tremendous change. And then our different topography of our city, 472 miles of streets. Fire Station 82, Mr. Garcetti and I got that built thanks to the people of Los Angeles, right on Hollywood Boulevard. It's right here. If you get a call that goes south to Sunset Boulevard to KTLA at Van Ness and Sunset, it can get there in 2 minutes. If you got to go the same distance up Beechwood Canyon, it could be 7 minutes. Why? Because of the narrowness of the roads, because of the cars that are parked, because of the hillside grades. All that has to be taken into account, and it's not just in my district, it's in everybody's district. How do you figure it? Also, how many people do you know, Chief, offhand? I know, but I ask. People died by fire. 17 died by fire last year, which is down. I think that's the most important number that we have to look at. that we're down. And also, members, got to realize there's a separation of service in the sense that we may help someone and an incident, an accident, in a violence, of a challenge. And then when they go to County Hospital, USC, where they get the greatest care from the greatest dedicated hospital staff, we don't know the outcome of that individual in a statistical matter at all. Is that correct, Chief?
That's absolutely correct.
That is not, so we don't know that number. We're not here. And even the firefighters, to try to create, they're supposed to be separate from the emotional issue, because every day they're answering a call to help someone's life and to be there. So I would just say one of our problems is that we don't often find out who is the smartest, youngest, because technology changes so quickly, to get in there to get that statistical information. As recently as a few years ago, there was a tradition that when you came to the firehouse in the morning, you signed like a registration. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
And now it's by computer. But there was a tradition just like a few short years ago. I also want to say, Mr. Scobin, you're in a unique position. You work for the great Los Angeles Police Department, but if you go to Battalion 5 in Hollywood at 27s, and there's a battalion chief there, his support staff is one person if he's lucky. One person in the emergency command, where there should be emergency command support. Next door, the captain of Hollywood area, which has a size that's not as large as a battalion, has a number of people in command. The structures have been built differently. And we ask our fire department to do very different things. And they're always there. And there's less than 1,000 in the streets today. And if an earthquake happens, there's only going to be those who are there now, until a recall comes to National Guard and mutual aid. So if we do this right, we got to figure the proper way. But it is a challenge every day in Los Angeles for the 105 fire stations and other auxiliary units that serve the people. I just hope we take this as a moment to change our thinking and also give them the support. When you mentioned the fine gentleman of the 12th District that the fire department sold us, no department sells us anything. We have to make a tough decision with the budget that we have. I think you'd want to triple the size of have heavy duty task force and more people at times. But if we don't have the money, we can't do it, so we got to do it right. And I will take one message for all those out there. We have to be prepared, because if there's an incident right there, if the epicenter is from an earthquake, there will be resources, but out in the outlying areas there won't. Community emergency response team, very important. The community engagement is very important. And I got the red flag, Mr. President, so I just wanted to make that point and show you the diversity of our city, the challenge that we have, whether you go north or south, east or west, the roadways are different, and we have to do that. Thank you.
Mr. LaBonge, you received the red flag about a minute ago. With that said, anyway, well said, Tom. If you could come up here, I'm going to get the chief to respond, and then we will go to Mr. Alarcon.
Thank you very much. Councilman LaBonge, we're working with the hospitals now with our electronic patient care record to get that outcome data, because that is important to find out how effective our emergency medical services for those close to 1,100 calls that we respond on. And the men and women of this department do an outstanding job every day. Outstanding job. Fire loss, the lowest for any major city in the United States again this year. That's both for loss of life and the loss of property. And that preparedness piece is critical, Councilman LaBonge, as we work to expand the community emergency response teams and partner with the communities that we serve with those 105, 106 community fire stations to make sure that they're prepared and have the information that they need and the training that they need to handle that disaster.
Chief, thank you, and just thank you for the men and women who are out there working today.
Absolutely.
Right now, I'd like to call in Mr. Alarcon, 7th District.
Council members, I believe absolutely that the men and women of the fire department are the best trained, most capable fire personnel in the world. But even Barry Bonds can't hit home runs with a plastic bat. And the greatest basketball coach can't win a championship with 4 players on the court. That's what we're doing to our fire department. We're asking them to make our personnel, who are the most capable, act as if they are the best in the country. At the same time, we are under-resourcing them. We are not providing them with the equipment that they need to be able to be the best. I do want to say I agree with the chief wholeheartedly. The number one problem at LAFD is that we have underfunded them if we want them to be the best fire department in the nation. But I would also mention to the chief that when the decision was made to cut the department, you promised us that the response times were at a national norm, were what was acceptable based on national fire response guidelines. That turned out to be untrue, whether you knew it or not. It turned out to be untrue. So the fundamental question before this council is, now that you know that the response times are not at the national norms, would you have changed your vote when we cut the budget? I voted against that because I knew in my heart that we would be taking lives. Taking lives. Every minute means lives will be lost. That's what we're talking about. We talk about statistics, talk about reports, consultants, technology. Let's talk about the lives that we want our fire department to save. The question each and every one of us council members has to ask ourselves is, if we knew that the response times would be higher than the national requirements, the national standard, would we have voted for those cuts anyway? Now, if your answer is yes, I would have voted for the cuts, then stop crying. Stop complaining. But if your answer is, I wouldn't have cut the budget if I knew that the response times were going to be increased by almost a minute above the national standards, then let's get busy and fund this department the way they need to be funded. Every minute somebody suffers a heart attack means that there's a 7 to 10% increase on the chance that they are going to die. A 6-minute response time means a 42% to 60% chance that that person is going to die. That's what we're talking about. I want that minute back. I want us to figure out where we're going to get the revenue to fund this department to make them the best. Because we're not talking about baseball, we're not talking about basketball. We're talking about saving the lives of the people that we represent in the city of Los Angeles. And God forbid it's one of your family members. Let's fund this department.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Councilman Alarcon.
Yes. Mr. President, first of all, Mr. Alarcon, you're right on the mark, okay? Sometimes I think that the chief was the scapegoat, and he went out there and did that for the last chief, and then because he was so good at it, he's the chief. But he could be the fall guy, too, in all this. This is the report, folks. This is the report that appears on November 8th on the website of the fire department. My guy got it, John Gregory, off the website, though we haven't gotten it officially. We've had a chance to go through it a little bit, Mr. President, and I have a few questions if I could ask Chief.
You certainly can. Look there and ease yourself in the chair, Mr. Rosendahl.
Great.
Before you speak, hold this time. Chief, is there a report we should receive? Because no one's received it yet.
That report it cleared through Fire Commission on November 22nd, and we were awaiting scheduling at Public Safety. So I do not know if they have received it.
Is there a copy of it?
I have a copy right here.
Well, we got a copy machine. Lisa,
Butler,
get out here.
Yeah.
Chief Butler and I are prepared to give very important verbal presentations today to you.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll call on Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes.
And then we'll get the verbal presentation. But I think members would like to see some written report, Mitch. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to put this to Chief Butler, if I could ask him, Chief, if he could answer some questions. It has been clear to me that in order to provide adequate response time in some of the hillside and remote portions of my district, we not only need to add additional resources, but also need to look at adding new fire stations. Your response to that?
Good morning, Council. Assistant Chief Patrick Butler, Special Operations Division. The question about resource deployment and the hillside communities, I don't know if Chief Rueda, would you like to just address that piece? In terms of where to place apparatus. Yeah. And then I could speak directly to some of the statistical analysis and the data in the report, if that's okay.
Yes, I'd like to know that because, frankly, my concern, too, is with the using your cell phone to put in the call and they can't identify those cell phones so readily. It's more difficult to even to get to circumstances. And I'd just like you to go through the list. When you looked at the controller's report, what analysis did you get from the controller that was helpful in this?
Okay, so let me take your cell phone call. So in the city of Los Angeles, when you call 911, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But one of the ways is cell phone. And about 60% of our calls to 911 are via cell phone.
Right.
Cell phone, there's phase 1 and phase 2, kind of old generation and new generation. And so the old phones don't really have the GPS coordinates, and the new phones have the GPS coordinates. So in general, what happens is cell phone calls take longer for us to process. So that would be kind of and it's only because we need to get a good address validation. Some of the analysis we did showed that in some cases, 22 seconds longer in call processing because of that. So cell phones are, and more people, I mean, my kids, you know, that's really the technology tool that we have. And in the future, our CAD system will be able to also process those type of calls and even text messaging. But you are correct.
The problem is you can't have your cake and eat it too, you know, in this world. And the people in my district don't like the towers. Yeah. But without the towers, you don't get the cell phone to work. So we need to identify those areas in which districts, all the districts, where there's inadequate cell phone coverage and get those towers up. And I'd like to get a better analysis of how we can go forward with doing that. How often did you guys meet as a committee, and where do you take these recommendations going forward?
Well, the task force met weekly. We started on July 7th, and it's a group of folks from, you know, inside the department and outside the department. And it was pretty exciting because there's a lot of folks from the outside that never had an opportunity to look inside the department. And one thing I could tell you is they were amazed at the amount of data we as a department are able to kind of process. So from a research perspective, they were interested in that. But we met weekly. We put hundreds of hours into it, and you know, I provided briefings with the chief, and we put a lot of time and effort into it. USC and RAND did this pro bono, which was also a very good piece of work on their behalf. But,
okay, a lot of people ask me when I have a medical emergency, and it gets clearly said to the fire station that it's a medical emergency. The ambulance shows up, but then a hook and ladder shows up as well. And people have questioned, and they've said to me, why is the hook and ladder there when it's a medical emergency, when maybe it shouldn't be there? I'm just curious. Maybe it should be there. I'm just curious.
I'm going to have my Emergency Services Bureau Commander, Mario Rueda, address that for you.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning, Councilman. We get that question asked quite a bit. With respect to medical emergencies, the most critical medical emergencies, both medical and trauma, require about 15 to 20 tasks to be completed. To improve survivability, most of those have to be done simultaneously. To ask two paramedics to complete those tasks in an efficient manner, potentially carry you down from stairs, down a driveway to a waiting ambulance without help just invites disaster. We found both personally within our department and national studies indicate that survivability is improved dramatically when those tasks are conducted simultaneously.
Well, that obviously makes sense from that standpoint. There's just no question about saying that. All right. As you heard Mr. Alarcon in his passionate speech mention, Chief, going forward with the budget, I really think it's important that you stay strong about the monies you need. Because I got to tell you, for me, it's just unacceptable, the present system. And if our mayor needs to get out there and explain this, he needs to get out there and explain it. I don't want any of this on my hands if we don't have enough adequate response time to the medical emergencies or to the fire emergencies. And you know, since day one, my fire emergencies are a big deal. Every time it gets dry out there, I worry about the hillsides and the canyons and everybody in it. You did respond in Sullivan Canyon that day beautifully. You got up there, you hung through the night. The community kept calling me, giving me updates and all that kind of stuff. But you know, when I look at Mountain Gate and their needs with Fire Station 19, for that to go to the valley but not go to Mountain Gate makes them very anxious and very worried, besides up there in the Palisades. So what I would rather have is the integrity of saying, look, we need X dollars, city, come up with it. That's why I hate to say it, that 5% sales tax, which is a regressive tax, and I'm a progressive. In my district, I know, could support that because the other tax would have been property transfer tax. It would have been stuff that directly affects people in different methods. But if we could bring in $220 million on that, that would help you go forward. So what I'd rather see is you saying we need X dollars, period. And let the chips fall where they may. Let us be responsible to figure this out and go forward with it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. I appreciate that. I'm going to ask the committee chair, Mitch Englander, just because there were some points that he wanted to make to get to the commissioner, et cetera.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to try to take this back home and focus on the report if we could now. There's been a lot of comments that we can just throw money at the situation, and the fact is, we know, and Chief, you and I have talked about this in great detail, it's not just a matter of throwing money at the situation first. It's not just a matter of throwing water on the fire. It's not more water that puts out the fire. It's having a strategic approach as well. And so with this, you've done a lot of work with your task force. I wanted to hear from the experts. I also wanted to thank Chief Butler and Commissioner Scobin specifically, who have also worked tirelessly on this. Right now, the idea is to talk about solutions. And it's not just more money, because you can't fix what you can't measure. And so what the task force has done is put this report together to launch accurate measurement analysis and really has done a terrific job at doing that. So if you could focus on that, walk us through that. I still don't know if the report's been generated and distributed. It's not on the website, by the way. It's on the agenda of the commission, but not on the. I would like to see it on the fire department's website as well. But if you could start walking us through that, so we can focus on the key findings and how that brings us to FireStat LA and what the next steps are to put this department back on track, that would be great. Thank you.
Before we get right into the report, I wanted to reach back and thank Councilman Rosendahl for your continuing support of public safety, and you're absolutely right of the critical nature of it, and to thank Councilman Alarcon. We are dedicated to getting the right resource to the right location as quickly as possible, and with an increase in call load and a reduction in resources, the way that we improve response time is by putting more resources in the field, and that takes money. Chief Butler, and as the head of the IDA task force, did a phenomenal job, and it is a great report that we hope to bring through public safety, but now we're bringing it here to the City Council early, and Pat will go into the details of the work that they accomplished and the conclusions they came to with our report.
Thank you, Chief. I'll go over the points of the task force report and then also save questions to the end, because there'll probably be a lot more questions. I can kind of get into the specificity of it, but I'll just start with kind of an overview. The fire chief formed the task force on July 7th with support of the Fire Commission. And basically our charge was to identify potential issues and provide recommendations and solutions related to the department's information and data analysis. This cross-functional team, which included members that we heard today, RAND, USC, LAPD, our own city workforce, ITA, and others, we came together and basically took on this task. This task force looked at issues and established 3 tracks. Track 1 was to determine data accuracy and interpretation. We felt that to be the foundation of everything that we were going to go forward with. Without good, accurate data, then we want to make sure that we had the numbers to support our decisions. The second piece of the track was, once you get that data, what do we do with it? And that piece is the research plan and development of FireStat LA. FireStat LA is a data-driven and accountability system which will enable the LAFD to use leading-edge technology and innovative management techniques to kind of move forward. And Councilman Englander put forward that motion and has been driving that discussion for us to move forward in that direction. And the third piece of our track is going to be the actual implementation. I'm happy to report that on Friday we released one of our proposals out there to begin the development of FireStat LA and actually get the technology on board and into the fire stations. This report primarily focused on track 1, which is the data accuracy interpretation. We analyzed millions and millions of pieces of data, and we developed kind of a 3-team approach, 3 teams within our task force. These research teams were given projects to come up with solutions to problems that we came along the line with. So we look at this data, we found a lot of outliers. In some cases, we found response times that took 28 hours. Well, clearly that's a mistake. So we began to delve down into it. What is it about our data that's causing these anomalies? We found about a half a dozen issues actually in the programming and reporting side of the CAD system, the computer-aided dispatch system. Now, the CAD was designed to dispatch to dispatch resources, but it wasn't really designed for the reporting and requirements of today's society and today's environment. So with that, these three teams got together and we went piece by piece. And we actually developed a methodology. First, we would analyze the CAD data. We would identify potential issues and outliers and anomalies. One thing very important, we initiated a lot of discussion and dialogue. Our colleagues from the RAND Corporation were very good at providing that piece, asking those tough questions of us. And once we came to an agreement on a solution, we would implement it in a test sandbox, a test bed server, to make sure that our solutions were accurate. Because if you can imagine, if you implement even a fix that you think is the right fix, you run millions and millions of calls and it's wrong, you're going to have bad outcomes. So in the end, we found 4 areas that kind of brought highlight to us about issues in our current system. One, it's the LAFD CAD system. It's a 30-year-old system. It was reverse engineered in 2002. And it's been battle tested. It's done well, but it's really lacked a lot of the scalability and the advancements in technology now for us to really move forward. So the CAD presented a lot of issues. Well, we didn't want to just leave issues on the table. We wanted to put solutions in place. So we implemented about a half a dozen short-term fixes to ensure that we could report accurate data, once again, to the public. The second, also in the CAD, we also used some of the findings in the controls report, which talked about the emergency and non-emergency separation of calls, which we've implemented that policy in our system. The next piece is training and education. So what we found was that a lot of folks that were making data-based decisions didn't necessarily have the training background and education to make anything from that data. So it's important to have a really good understanding of the data you're working with once it's accurate, and also have an understanding of all the systems involved. It became apparent that policy decisions on data requires professionals to be involved and to help guide us through that. With the support of the Los Angeles Police Department, we have Mr. John Newman who's been assisting us with this piece of information as well. He's been kind of my wingman in this part. The third piece is integration and synchronization. There's a lot of folks involved operating in silos. And what we found was, in our direct observations, that there was a lot of folks that actually had great information that were never accessed. And so part of the problem is, how do you integrate and synchronize all the people that are involved with dealing with the data in your organization? We have ITA, we have MIS, we have the planning section, and all those different entities access the databases and also have different potential interpretations of what it means, and that's why interpretation is a key part of our findings here. Make sure that we're all talking the same definitions. And finally, the technology. There are a number of technologies available out there that can enhance public safety. And currently in the department, we're at varying degrees of progress of those. But there are a lot of systems out there that we can go out and adopt and that we're looking forward to, and that's the task force is going to continue to look at what is out there that can improve our response times. But response times, in terms of technology, you can only get to a certain point, and as mentioned a lot, that at some point you may be resource deficient, and that is important to look at as well. We did a response time analysis just to take a benchmark, and in September we found that citywide response times for emergency calls, which include call processing and on, so basically when Mrs. Smith calls 911 and talks to an LAFD dispatcher to the time they're on scene, how long does that take in our city? And the average is 6 minutes and 47 seconds. But I'll tell you one thing is there's an issue with using averages. And so I also was very important in this report that we talked about. The professors at USC were very keen on that averaging has a tendency to hide outliers. So basically you're taking low density and high density populations and averaging. And those outliers, which are real calls, if you're the one calling 911, you want to make sure that your response is on time. So I think to address those outliers, that's why we have a 90% standard in the NFPA. That's called a robust statistic. I joke about it that if Bill Gates or Warren Buffett were to walk in this room right now, all of our income averages would probably increase. But that's not necessarily a fair assessment, because you need to have a robust elimination factor, and that's why we use the 90%. So averaging is just something to look at. And finally, FireStat LA is one of the important elements to move forward, is to ensure that once we take this data and that we integrate it into our organization, that we'll have not only the data and the technology, but really management and leadership opportunities to improve performance. I'd like to thank the Chief and Commissioner Scobin for the support. They've been completely supportive of this. This has been a project for me that's involved something I have probably not been involved with before, where you're able to work at the highest levels of government in an organization kind of outside the confines of our normal organizational structure. And with that's kind of a brief overview of what we did.
So would you like to hear the Commissioner now, Mr. England?
I'd like to, if I could.
Yes, please.
Yes. If it'd be at all possible, if before we take questions, could I have Commissioner Scobin, who is our liaison? I'd like to have him
Well, that's
make some
what I
comments.
just said,
Okay.
Chief. I asked Mr. Englander if we could hear from the Commissioner at this point, and he nodded yes.
Yeah,
So
that was going to be my next request. But and with that, though, if we could give the chief the due applause that he deserves in working on this and working with his chief, Butler, as well, because while we can all complain and be aggravated, and there's an easy solution just to throw money at the problem and put more boots on the ground, everything that was just presented, and it was done so under our chief's leadership. Chief Cummings, thank you for working with the task force to put this together. But Chief Butler, your experience, your education, your history in this has just been phenomenal. Your focus on this has been razor sharp. This is exactly what it's going to take to put the department back on track. And so, the Commissioner, if you could walk us through your findings and
Thank
as
you
well.
very much.
Thank you.
I think it's very important to recognize that we have a lot to celebrate here today, because this report is probably better called an action plan rather than a report, because what it does is lay out the first steps in something that I believe will change the paradigm and change the culture of this department as it relates to data. And also I believe that what you're going to see is this task force, which is probably better called a strike force or a rapid deployment strike force, came together in a very short time. And what the history of it was that it's no secret that there were issues regarding response time. And it's no secret that everybody was trying and we weren't able to accomplish it, and then we kept getting hit on that. And we wanted to do it right. Jeff Godown came in, the mayor brought him in. He started a project. I think he raised some very good issues, and unfortunately he left. And your commission, and this is where I think the system works well, your commission at a meeting discussed how do we keep up the momentum, how do we fill the void. And Commissioner Hudley Hayes, who's our president, who I think, by the way, is a phenomenal person in any measure, and I met with the chief, and out of that meeting came the task force that chief appointed. So you've got your civilian oversight, but everybody felt that it should be an LAFD project, not a commission project, with commission oversight. And so the commission appointed me as its liaison. So what I did was represent the entire commission, which you need to know was involved and engaged in this. But what you have is something that people who are on the task force said they've never seen before, because the group got together at the very first meeting. What we said was, we're here to solve a problem. That problem is accurate data. That is the foundation upon which everything else is built. If we're going to talk about response time, if we're going to talk about deployment, if we're going to talk about other things, it has to be on a strong foundation of accurate data, and we have to focus on that. And we asked everybody's commitment. We said, if you're willing to put in the time, we want you. If you're here to be on a committee, please leave right now. Nobody left. And so what you saw was we didn't go out and hire consultants. And in fact, we had no budget. Chief Butler went out and paid for the coffee and water out of his own pocket for the first meeting. And if you want to provide that, we'll be happy to accept it for future meetings. And so you had this group of people with experts from SC and RAND guiding us who focused, and they had a laser focus on how do we get the data. And we didn't say, oh, it's a 30-year-old CAD, we can't do anything well as us. We said, how do we solve the problem, not what were the obstacles. And we found ways to get out of the CAD system what we needed to make it work right. And so really at no cost and no consultants and people who have other jobs doing other jobs come up with, identify the problems with the data, have solutions, test the solutions, implement the solutions, and that was done in 90 days through the task force that was appointed by the chief. And what I appreciated was the chief made it clear to the supervisors of those members of the department that this was a high priority for us, and that they needed the time to do that, and he allowed them to do that. So we learned a lot from this. One of the things that I think we all know, and we learned from this, and it's no different from any other organization, LAPD suffered from this at one time. We found out the department was very insular, and in that, not intentional, but that was just the culture. And once we started looking out, we found, gee, there are some practices elsewhere. And the way we found it was we had a firefighter, a firefighter level person, give us a tremendous recommendation about calls. And he said, gee, let's have your pure data, instead of just having emergency calls and non-emergency calls, and lump in there calls that start as emergency, but while they're en route, go to non-emergency, or calls that start as non-emergency and become emergency while they're going there, pull them out and make it a separate category. We looked at that, said it works, and then we found out, gee, that's done in many places around the country. We said, we need to look outside for best practices. While many best practices come here, we need not to be insular. And it's not an intentional insular, and certainly we're not insular in all ways, but I think we all saw that with LAPD and what happened when they made an intentional effort to look outside. So there are some reasons why the task force worked, and I'd like to tell you what they are. Number one, they were focused, they were mission-driven, and they were time-sensitive. They knew that we had to get this done right away, and we can't fail, and they just focused. So that we had the group that the chief talked about. All they did was work on how do we have correct data. That was their sole goal. They're so focused when they woke up in the morning, how do we have accurate data, and they solved that problem. The second one was we had what we call a sterile incubator environment. In other words, we had many really outstanding LA Fire Department personnel. Each person was picked because of their unique skills and qualifications. But we didn't work within the normal channels and the command structure of the fire department. We had the fire department people, we had the RAND people, we had the USC people, and we sort of moved them aside. And they were able to have an environment where they could throw things out there, didn't have to go for the typical approvals you might go through. And this is true in any organization, by the way, and really work as an independent, rapid deployment task force, reports to the chief appointed. The commission monitored it because I was involved and partnered with Chief Butler in overseeing the activities of it. But he was the boots on the ground. I mean, he's the guy who really did it. I merely provided, direction and a compass. So the next thing we did was we had the LA Fire Department team and sterile incubator environment. We didn't have to go through the normal processes, normal approvals. And we had the great leadership provided by Chief Butler. So when you read your report, I think you're going to say, gee, this task force was credible, this task force was honest, this task force pointed out the problems, they didn't hesitate to do so, they came up with solutions, and they got it right. Now, there's more to come, and I want to give you a little hint of some of what's more to come out of this task force. Recognize this task force is not for everything. I mean, it has a very specific, limited purpose, and someday, everything will get turned over to the department, and who knows, there may be another one, but it has a very limited purpose. And here's some more of the things that are going to come. Number one, we have all this data. The task force is working on a manual. It's kind of an owner's manual, if you will, kind of like when you buy a refrigerator. It's a guide to understanding the fire department incidents and responses. Everything, why is a certain unit 5 minutes? Why, when you add a paramedic, is the national standard go up to 8 minutes? What does this mean? And so it's going to be very significant for everybody to understand what the standards are, what the data is, what the measurements. Number two, RAND Corporation told us that they were so pleased with what they saw and the dedication of their task force that they're actually going to apply for one or more grants so that they can continue working for us without the cost to the city. And what that will focus on are components of FireStat LA other than response time. Because the goal is to have response time, which is the next thing. The task force, I think, gave everybody a very pleasant surprise. It's sort of almost a feeling if those of you who are my age will remember when we first had a person on the moon and how we all felt. Well, this task force, as we got into things and started solving problems, they realized what was possible. And what they actually did was develop out of the task force a complete system where the correct data now can go to anybody in the department and they can drill down, and as the chief talked about, they can say, okay, what's happening in this station at this time? What type of calls is this getting? Do we need education in this community, based on the calls we get? So that's ready to go, that dashboard. And finally, there is an elephant in the room that I'm going to mention, and it's probably going to make me very unpopular with everybody, but I feel it has to be mentioned because it's something that bothers me a great deal. We heard talk about how time is critical in responding, and that how half a minute or a minute can make a difference whether somebody lives or dies, and how we want to push down the response time. But there's part of this that the task force noted that we can't capture and we can't affect. And that's that when somebody calls 911, they get a call center that's not the fire department. They go to the police call center. And then they handle it, and then whatever time that takes, it then gets transferred over to the fire department. And that could be a lost 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds. And we don't have any way to measure it and don't even know for sure what that is. And that's not a criticism, but I think that's a structural problem where we have to look and say, gee, how do we eliminate that 30 to 60 seconds when somebody calls and needs fire service? Because that could mean life and death. And I think that's something we have to look at, something we have to try to fix, because as leaders in this community with responsibility for the lives of the people in this community, I don't think we can allow a 30 to 60 second delay which really is the response time, which isn't even shown in these figures when there's a way to fix it. And I'm not suggesting who mans it, how it's manned, or how it's staffed, where it's staffed. I'm suggesting that all the parties who have a stake in this get together and say, how do we eliminate that extra 30 to 60 seconds that is there when somebody calls and needs a fire service, particularly when we know 85% of our calls are medical type calls, and that can mean life and death. So I believe that has to be tackled. It's not a task force issue, but you'll see that's one of the issues that the task force says needs to be handled. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Commissioner, for all of your hard work. Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, Controller's audit was brought forward. My committee, audit committee, has been waiting 7 months to hear the results. Have you implemented any of the recommendations from the Controller's audit?
Absolutely. As soon as we got that controller's audit, and I'm sorry I don't have the report sitting in front of me, we responded back to the controller about the items that we've already taken place and moved forward with. Part of it was separating out the emergency, non-emergency calls and those transitional calls so they're clearly identified in the CAD system, and that's been taken care of as part of the fixes that the IDA task force moved forward with. But I think there's only one outstanding item from that, and we're working on that one issue, but everything else has been implemented.
Okay, and I know that my committee, audit committee, is waiting. We've been waiting to get this to the committee. It's been like 7 months, and I understand it's not ready yet, but we'd like to get that so we can come forward with any policy changes that need to be recommended by the City Council.
Very good.
So we appreciate that. Also, I want to acknowledge the commissioners that are here, and I appreciate them being here this morning. You mentioned $85 million in reductions, and I think what's happened is, it reminds me of what happened with the police department with the rape kits, where they didn't have the funds and rape kits were stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. Finally, someone said, are we going to do something about this? The money was appropriated. Then they cleared that backlog. And I think what happens oftentimes, and listen to the dialogue this morning, is we're looking at the department to be fully functional, take care of the people of Los Angeles, at the same time look at this budget and really say, well, we'll get by this time. We'll get by this time. And we're not getting by anymore. We're getting deeper in the hole. And when you mention 85% paramedic calls, one of the problems that I have is that we're not recovering the dollars that we put in that budget for paramedic calls. If 85% of the fire service is for paramedic calls, and I understand, and I've been to situations where people have a heart attack, and I see the fire personnel, the paramedics, working to try and save that person. It does take more than 2 people to manage that with all the activities that need to take place. I don't question that at all. But we're not collecting those revenues that we put in that budget on anticipation that we'll have this revenue to fund the fire department and other services. One of the issues is the revenue collection. We need to do something about that. Obviously have the funds so your department can have the dollars it needs to do the services. And it seems that oftentimes we will scapegoat here and there. And obviously right now it's the fire department. And then all of a sudden we say, we need to do something. You're the fire chief, and I know you have a love for the fire department. Your dad was a firefighter. I read all those articles about it. You have a real passion for the people, along with the firefighters, paramedics, to serve the people. The people aren't here protesting that they're unhappy with the fire department. Mr. Walsh said that. The people are very, very appreciative of the fire service. But this body and this city can't manage by crisis, and it seems that we manage by crisis. The crisis of the rape kits, the crisis with the fire department will appropriate funds, and next week someone else is going to be struggling. We need to have a balanced environment and not go back and forth, the peaks and valleys. It just doesn't work. There's got to be consistency. And one of your captains told me one time at Hodgkin Center, he says, we are an insurance policy. When someone has a heart attack, someone has a medical emergency, and there's a fire breaks out, we are your insurance policy. And what does that insurance policy worth to you and the people of Los Angeles? I was at a fire recently at Ventura and Reseda Boulevard, multiple alarm fire, and to see all the apparatus rolling in and all the apparatus coming in, and the battalion chief was there. He didn't have a staffer, and he was managing everything. It reminded me of a juggler trying to juggle everything, bring all these companies in, manage the personnel, make sure everything's right. Then he started getting some resources to assist him, and it was a multi-alarm call. I'm surprised LaBonge didn't show up because everybody in the world was there, and they did save adjoining buildings. But to see them in action and to see how dedicated they are, and I spoke to some of them afterwards, things calmed down. A lot of them are disillusioned because it goes back and forth like a seesaw. They need to be consistent. We need to be consistent. Say we're going to fund it. I see another fire commissioner, Steve Fazio. Thank you for being here also, Steve, a new fire commissioner. You have a new UFLAC president. So maybe we can come with some consistency instead of this back and forth, where we go back and forth, where we're going to take $40 million, we're going to take $30 million, and then we're going to give it back, and then we're going to put you on the hot seat. I'm not done yet, but I will be in a minute.
No, you're red flag.
Just a red flag. Just one more thing, and this was brought to me by Carlos Granda from Channel 7. Another controversy, which is a little off the subject, but Station 63. You may have seen it. It's on video. It's another brewing controversy in the fire department. You don't need any more controversies. So whatever's happening over there at 63, it needs to stop. And it's a situation that falls under your leadership. Somehow those folks need to understand they're professional firefighters, and what's happened on the video, what is now in the LA Times, is not acceptable. I just want to close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. President. A lot has been said, but I'll just make a couple points. One is I agree we need to have adequate funding, and I've been calling for that since I've been here. But the longer I'm here, the longer I think that we don't know exactly where that funding should go and how much of it we actually need. I think data collection will help a lot. But I think, like a lot of things that I've seen the LAPD do in recent years, I think we also have to think smarter rather than just spending the money. One step was mentioned, which is trying to deal with the 30 or 45 seconds we lose by having calls go to a central location that is not fire department related, and then the fire calls coming over. I've always thought that we should actually have a separate line for fire emergencies, and then if occasionally an LAPD call goes to it by accident, then they refer it the other direction. But I think we need to look at every step of the response act and look at whether there are ways that we can save time. And I think if you review it step by step, we'll actually get a lot better results, and we'll be able to implement something that results in quicker response time apart from the resources that we'd like to add back. The other thing is I did a motion somewhat to the effect of what we're talking about in June. The only thing I really haven't heard answered is, in terms of data collection, is part of the problem that we don't have enough resources that were applied to data collection, and that part of the problem that we don't have the right people doing data collection? Have either of those played a part in some of the data problems that we've had?
Correct. Even with the IDA task force, everyone that's on that task force was pulled from other priority projects to put on that. So we do not have a dedicated staff, although we have requested that staff. The training aspect is something that also they identified, and we're going to make sure that we are providing the training and hiring the specialized people to do that. And the third piece is the technology, is the hardware. We are using very old computer systems with very old software on them.
Because my fear with the staffing is that by nature you're a department that's in battle, that's way understaffed, and you put the staff where you might think it belongs, which is answering the emergencies and doing the work that you need to do, but that you might not put the priority to the data collection and fully staffing that. And in a way, because that directs all our strategy, it may be as important or more important. So if the problem has been that we've neglected that in the past for lack of funding and staffing, I think we'd all encourage that we make that a higher priority and more of a focus.
Councilman Koretz, if I could respond to that, because the day I became a commissioner, Councilman Englander sat me down and said, FireStat LA is one of my top priorities, and I need you to focus on that. And that's really how I got involved in it, because I was at LAPD. But the data is not just what we're talking about today. Today we dealt with data that relates to calls for service. And the task force actually developed a way that with minimal resources we can have that data brought to us. And the hardest part of that is going to be, as the chief said, training our people, getting them to the culture to adopt it, to understand that it's a tool to which they can make good decisions. And it's a very powerful tool, to give them the information to use their best judgment. But as we developed out FireStat LA, we have part of the task force that's looked throughout the department and said, what is it that we should be measuring? And how do we get that feed? So whether it be workers' compensation, whether it be traffic collisions, whether it be IOD, whether it be personnel complaints, whether it be community involvement, we need to pull all that data together into a management tool. So that's going to be the more difficult part, and that's where we're going to be coming to you for funding. But I think what we've proven is that we're not just asking for dollars. I mean, we took the 30-year-old CAD system, and this task force figured out a way to get accurate data out of it that we need. Now, there's more data we'd like to get that we can't get out of it. There are things we can't do with it, but we didn't just sit back and cry. We solved that problem, and that's how we're approaching it. And we didn't ask you for money just to do it, right? We took it out of our hide to get it done. So we're only going to be asking you for money when we need it. But I agree with you. Technology and data does not compete with the other parts of the department. It's an important driver, and the way we want to do it is not by competing, by doing it smart. I think this task force should have proved to you that the LA Fire Department is capable of putting together a world-class task force that had amazing results in a very short period of time and solved the problem that had been nagging this fire department significantly for a period of time. And that's significant. And that I think we need to celebrate.
Yeah.
Very good.
The one last thing on that, Councilman Koretz, is that absolutely the data is very important, and we need to make sure that we're using it. In fact, the fire service across the country is using data more to make those deployment decisions and the modeling decisions that they have. But it is a very difficult decision when there's limited staffing, when it comes down to putting an ambulance out there to save a life today or looking at tomorrow. So while on paper, yes, we can understand, absolutely we need that data, but that family doesn't understand that when you say you have another data analysis when you could have had a rescue ambulance. So we have to balance those two extremely emotional competing issues.
Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief, and everyone from the Fire Department, Commissioner Scobin, for being here and giving this report. I want to touch on a couple of things. First of all, I obviously haven't had a chance to look at this yet, but I know from previous dealings with Chief Butler that this is going to be a very thoughtful and comprehensive review, and I appreciate it very much. I'm looking forward to hearing it in public safety and considering these issues further. I have long agreed with the need for more data analysis, collection and analysis in order to deploy resources in an appropriate way in an environment of very limited resources. And I appreciate that the department has put new focus on exactly that effort. In response to Mr. Koretz's question about available resources to do that work, of course, we know that if department personnel has to be redeployed to do that when your administration is already way too thin, that does detract from other essential duties. But I think it should be noted, too, that that's why this council budgeted $500,000 for a third-party deployment of resources study, the RFP of which went out last week. So it was precisely for the reason you've described, Chief, that the council made the point to do that so that we would be able to have that data analysis and consideration without impinging further on your already strapped brass. I think everyone here agrees on a couple of things. First, right now, even with all the challenges that the department faces, even with the limited resources we have, I think that we are safe in saying this is the finest fire department in the United States, if not the world. I absolutely believe that. I also absolutely believe that the fire department remains underfunded and we need to do more to bring the funding level up. But I want to bring a little context to that too, because there's been some discussion about cuts and so on. Right now, in the fiscal year 2012-2013 budget, the first one that we considered as Budget and Finance Chair, the fire department is budgeted at over $40 million more than the previous year. We have a higher budget for the fire department now than we have had in the last 4 fiscal years. So it's important to keep in mind that there is significant progress being made. We have to do more. We're still below where we were in 2008, to be sure, before the economic world collapsed. We have to bring it up at least to that level again, I believe. And I think the motion that's before you, members, 19A, provides, again, for a report back in 45 days for a full restoration plan within the next 3 to 5 years, which will be made possible if Measure A passes and if we are able to bring in the new revenues that we'll need to be able to bring these funding levels up. Without that, I don't see how it'll be possible to do. And I don't think that it's fair to really ask the department to come up with a plan to fully restore services unless we have a revenue source to rely upon that we're going to be able to do that. And that's the reason that Measure A was so important and will be so important on the March ballot. So with that, I thank you all for being here and thank you for your renewed focus on considering how to make the most of these resources.
Ms. Perry.
Very much, Mr. President. And if Mr. Santana, I think he's here on the floor. Okay, great. I wanted to ask Mr. Santana a quick question, and it's just about the 5-year plan that is being developed by the CAO's office in consultation with the fire department. And I wanted to know what the status of that is. And before you answer that question, Mr. Santana, one quick thing for the fire chief. Being chief of a department is, or the head of a department is always to be in the line of fire. And I know you accept that responsibility and the heavy mantle and the burdens that go along with it. So I recognize that. And I know that it's also very difficult to tell people what they don't want to hear, but that's the hallmark of a top-notch manager, to tell people what they need to hear, and they may not want to hear it, but they need to hear it. And so I hope that you will continue to feel secure in making the comments that you need to make and making them on the record, which is why I'm circling back to talking about this 5-year plan, the status of the plan, the level of consultation that has taken place to date, and the partnership, if you will, in developing the analysis for this plan with the department itself. First, Mr. Santana, and then Chief, if you will say a few words on the record, I'd appreciate it.
I think it's important to point out, as Mr. Krikorian stated, that in fact the department has received not a decrease in funding, actually has received an increase in funding. Budget to budget, from last year to this year, the department received over $40 million of additional general fund revenue to maintain the infrastructure services that they currently have. And their commission currently is discussing submitting a budget that would, what's currently being proposed is an additional $50 million for next year. So just to clarify the record, your council and the mayor has actually not cut the fire department's budget. It actually has increased the budget over the last 2 years. It's at the highest level it's been over the last 2 years. Given that, part of what's been directed is that we worked with the department to establish a 3 to 5 year plan for restoration. It's important to start off with what restoration means. Where's the starting point from that? And so part of that work involves, as directed by your council, the selection of an outside consultant to essentially do a thorough review of the way the department is currently organized to assist us in how we could best bring better accountability, but greater efficiencies, and obviously improved service levels. And so we've issued an RFP for a consultant. We're expecting to receive responses later in the next several weeks, and that will be based on that work that's done. That will be part of what we will submit in response to the specific assignment that's been given, and we'll also use that as a tool as we make recommendations on the budget for fiscal year 13-14.
And one last question, if you will. In developing the RFP and developing the analysis for this, what's the level of involvement that the chief has had? And also, I want to make sure that there are benchmarks in there, thresholds to cross, because we cannot develop a 3 to 5 year plan in a vacuum. All departments are under fire now. Everyone is subject to scrutiny. These fire, police, public works, planning, sanitation, they're all under fire right now. These are core city services, basic city services, and of course fire and police are among the top core services that we have to continue to offer. So I just need to know, again, the level of inclusion that the fire chief has had in the development of the methodology for this RFP to be issued. And the chief can speak to that, and Mr. Santana, if you would too, because I want to say for the record that the chief has been strategically included in the development of this process, because ultimately the responsibility will fall on his shoulders, and as such he should be afforded the professional opportunity to make the strongest case possible.
That's correct. So we shared, we were hoping that the RFP would go out sooner, but we wanted to make sure that we shared the proposal with the fire department. We also shared it with the chair of budget and finance. Public safety. We shared it with the mayor's office to ensure that it reflected sort of everyone's input, and so that was part of the reason why we released it recently. But this is obviously a plan that's going to be developed and ultimately implemented by the department. So we see our role as supporting the department in the development of this plan.
Great. And would you allow the chief to speak?
Yes, of course.
Absolutely. And Miguel has reached out, and we have had some input on this RFP as it goes forward, both myself and the command staff. There's just disagreed a bit on philosophy moving forward as to the focus of it. As the fire chief, my command staff and I are committed to focusing on providing the most effective public safety for the city of Los Angeles, so building a model that's there. And my perception is that the report is more to look at that, but also in concert with finding the most cost-effective way to provide that public safety. So looking for savings.
Okay. Mr. Garcetti, followed by Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues, for this entire discussion. Look, I think the history is pretty clear. We had a downturn in the economy. Cuts were made, and they were made right here. We know that, and we're big boys and big girls. And a couple, Mr. Alarcon and I think Mr. Kretz voted against it, but everybody else voted for that. We know that, and we'll take responsibility. But part of today is to help you stop any of the bleeding. And I'm glad we've reestablished the record. Mr. Krikorian said that we actually not only stopped the bleeding, but have put more money back in there. Part of that, was making sure 318 positions weren't permanently cut. Part of that was establishing neighborhood fire services line item. Part of that was the restoration of a lot of the proposed cuts and then more added to that. But there's also now what I want to see when I said fighting. I'm not talking about fighting in the past. I'm talking about right now. When we have new funds, CAO may not like it. Some folks around here may not. But we're on the record saying new funds should go back. So whether it's increased ambulance billings, whether it's our CLA's, Mr. Miller's proposal on having EMT insurance, which is kind of slowed to a crawl, which was, I thought, a great idea for us to have and other cities have had. Those things, that's what I want to see fighting for, to make sure, hey, keep that in the department so that we can continue at least some forward momentum. Like I said, not 20% a year for 5 years, but something out there so that we can be held accountable in here, so that the folks that are out there in the fire stations can feel more momentum as well. And so all of us can know, indeed, that we are on that pathway, that it isn't. I appreciate being a general manager. Sometimes folks are saying, look, take a further cut. That's what everybody has to do this year. This council is on the record saying with the fire department, that's not what we want. And so we want to make sure those are synchronous. This is a really great start. This isn't a plan. this is the analysis, but it is something moving forward. How and where we restore, one other thing I'd say is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because there's two different things. You, I think, answered my questions with, well, we don't know everything that we need to know until to give you the detailed 5-year plan. There's two different aspects. There's the detail, which we shouldn't be micromanaging, which we should trust you as chief to make those decisions about where things are going to go, what new systems, et cetera. But the other part is about the resources. And so when I asked for a 5-year plan, it was to help the resources come back. You'll make the decisions about where those resources go. And of course, they link together. But we could wait 2 years to have a perfect granular level of data, and then if we start saying then we have to start formulating what the plan is, that's too long from my opinion, from my time, from my constituents, and to make right what we had done here before in tough times. So lastly, I think the longer-term re-envisioning of the department, take those on 2 tracks. The longer-term re-envisioning of the department, we want to keep moving forward with this data, with the support that you have here, but help us help you with that piece of where we're at now and what we can expect this year. So because we asked this report today to look at where we're going to be, and we have 19A, what is realistic for what you think you can be bringing here for us to say, okay, here's a pathway now in budget time. I mean, we're already well into it, which is part of the urgency of why I wanted this here now. I didn't want us to have 3 months from now check in and like, whoops, we missed the opportunity again for the commission, for the department, and for any of us to say this is where we're going to put a piece back. Is 45 days going to be enough to be able to come back and say, not on the detailed level, but on the funding level, this is what we think is realistic for this year?
We'll need 60 days to report back on that 5-year build-back plan, but we've approved the Fire Commission approved today our proposed budget for next fiscal year, which has our requests and what we think we're going to need to provide that public safety in the city of Los Angeles for next fiscal year, which adds back resources, and it has to start a training academy, and it fully funds some of those civilian support positions and some of the positions in the information and data analysis. So we have that plan for next fiscal year that's already there. It's out as part of the budget process, and we'll continue to look that year ahead. It's just we need the more detailed analysis and data from the IDA task force as we set up that data analysis unit to project long-term to see where we're going to be 5 years from now and give that specificity.
And my time is up. I know, Mr. President, there's some cards on number 20 as well, so there's some folks that asked if they could be heard. But as you do that, keep us up to date as rapidly as this stuff comes out simultaneously if we can. I know Mr. Englander and I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to also, if I could, acknowledge my fellow commissioners, 4 of whom are here today to show their support for this department and the task force report. And I will tell you that I couldn't be prouder to serve with such a fine group of people who are very dedicated, who work very hard, and are very engaged. So I think we owe a debt of gratitude to all the 5 members of the Fire Commission.
Okay, Mr. Rosendahl, followed by Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing this healthy discussion to take place. It's as important as anything in our world is, and I appreciate that. Could Janitha Hudley-Hayes come up, the head of the commission? I'd love to have a comment from her. And I also want to ask a question from the new union leader, which is, would you be comfortable submitting the most recent data from the task force to the International Association of Firefighters so for them to conduct an independent analysis of the response time?
If I can speak on that, we're working now with the IAFF. One of the issues, we gave them our response time data. We had to de-identify it because of HIPAA.
Yes.
That wasn't sufficient enough for them to do their analysis, so we're working back and forth to get through that issue. We want to use them not only to look at our response time data, look at our deployment, but also to model our paramedic deployment as well. We're looking for every opportunity to partner with IAFF and IAFC to utilize their resources to look at the data for us independently.
I appreciate that. And, you know, Frank Lima is from the Palisades, and I'm honored that you are now the head of the union, and we look forward to your leadership in
Mr. Rosendahl, I'm going to ask Frank to come up and sit at the table
that would be great.
when we get a free seat. So with that said,
Ms. Hayes, could
Madam
you just
President.
bring us, yes. Janitha Headley-Hayes, God bless you, first of all, for serving on that commission and chair for as long as you have. What's your reflective comments on what's going on now?
The first comment that I'd like to make is I'd like to thank everyone that's in this council chamber right now. I am clear that this city council, under the leadership of President Wesson, is very concerned and very committed to public safety and very committed to funding the fire department at a level that keeps it at the forefront. This is actually the best fire department in the nation as far as I'm concerned. One of the things that I do want to say, though, is I want to make sure that everybody understands that I am not pushing back on a 5-year plan, but I want to make sure that people understand that it would be ill-advised to put forward a 5-year plan if we really and truly are not looking at data, if we're not mining data, if we're not looking at everything that we need to look at. I believe that what we can do, Councilmember Garcetti and Councilmember Englander, is we could do a really great overview, and we could look at assumptions. That's how I work. I happen to have an MBA, and this is the work that I do when I get paid. I don't get paid for what I do for the fire department. I think what you can do is you can expect to see assumptions. I think what you can do is you can expect a fire department that should be looking at 5 years down the line. We're talking about now, we're just in 2013. We're looking 5 years down the line. We're talking about 2017. So the city is going to look entirely different. The call load is going to be different for emergency services calls. And so I think what you have to do is you have to take the data, which is why we're asking President Wesson, because it was your action for 45 days, I believe that we should actually be asking for 60 days so that you can have a robust look at. I agree.
I have no problems with it being 60
I agree, Councilman Garcetti, that we should come forward with something. But I think that if you don't look at the data, I think if we don't understand that what the IDA task force is doing is this. The response times is a portion of what they're doing. If you're going to have a 21st century fire department, you are going to have to look at and be data-driven about a lot of things. So we're talking about hardware, we're talking about software, we're talking about human capital, we're talking about training, and that's on the management side. We still also have to talk about what we do on the operational side, which is how do we bring back resources so that what Councilmember Rosendal's issue is about what happens with people who do live in the canyons and we have a geographic problem that we have to resolve. How do we, in fact, differentiate staffing, for example, in our fire stations so that we are moving quickly and we are leaner, but we are more flexible in terms of what we do? And the other thing that I would like to make sure that all of you hear me say in the council room is that while I know that there's an RFP that's gone out to do an analysis that talks about efficiencies and talks about looking at the fiscal side, we have a very, very talented person in the fire department. It's Chief Drake. And I would like to ask to make sure that Chief Drake becomes a part of that discussion and a look at whoever is tapped to do that analysis. I know that you're looking at it from the standpoint of fiscal efficiencies. I want you to be able to also get a look at a lens that looks at it through public safety. How are we doing in terms of public safety? Do we need to believe that we're going to have the same kind of fire department that we had, say, in 2000? 1999? Absolutely not. But do we need to make sure that we are balancing public safety against physical efficiencies? I am a physical conservative. I'm the last person in the world. I'm a taxpayer. So I would be the last person in the world to sit here and tell you that I want us to play fast and loose with public money. That is not what I'm suggesting. But I am suggesting that it would be ill-advised. We need to move as quickly as we can, but so that we're thinking deeply, we're thinking broadly, we're looking at data, we're looking at how to use that data. A data analysis has to do with the query. And so we need to understand. So you're talking about human capital and you're talking about training so that we can make sure that our people can do that. All of that has a price tag. And I agree with both Councilman Englander and with Councilman Garcetti. You don't just throw money at a problem. We tried that with the war on drugs. We tried that with a whole bunch of things. I want you to hear me say that as the president of the Fire Commissioner, that body that is there to do oversight and to be the head of the department, I appreciate your sentiment. But I also want you to know that there is going to be a cost to this. I would like to thank Councilmember Alacon, I want to say to you that I remember when you made that same comment when Chief Berry was, I've been through 4 chiefs, but when Chief Berry was, you were the first person who stood up and said, tell us what you need, tell us how you need it, and we are going to make sure that we are going to be in a compact with you to make sure that that happens. That's what I hear in the room today. But I want to make sure that while we're doing this, that we do it as carefully as we can, that we do it and that it's data driven, that we look at the physical side of the house, we look at public safety, because I don't want to be off the commission and find that we wind up right here again 5 years from now. And I don't want any of you to be gone from the council chambers and have one say, well, I thought we settled this 5 years ago, and have us wind up in the same place. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And I particularly want to thank you, President Wesson, for giving us the additional time that we need so that we can come back with new information, better information presented to that. And I think that we should always be available to come to public safety and budget and finance. So I'd like to thank you for that.
My pleasure, and I do not think we're going to allow you to leave the commission. Frank, could you please come? We're going to introduce a motion and make you stay. Mr. Lima, you want to come forward? Mr. Zine, you want to ask your quick question?
President, Chief, percent of man hours spent on the medical calls versus fires. We know it's 85% of the calls, but the percent of man hours spent, one versus the other.
Yeah, staffing
personnel.
We'll have to get back to you with that number. Since it's more calls, it's definitely more time that's spent on them. But additionally, there's so much else that the firefighters do: maintaining quarters, training, maintaining the apparatus, doing public service, going out doing fire prevention inspections. There's a lot more that they do in their day, but we'll give you that breakdown of time.
And also on the constant staffing, which we have to do, we haven't hired in a long time. I know 318 were treated out. Overtime due to the lack of the firefighters, paramedics that are there. Have we done an analysis of that? What is costing us additional constant staffing versus the additional personnel we'd hire to fill those spots?
Absolutely. We haven't hired since 2008. We're requesting in the budget next year to be able to start a class in January of 2014. We will be about 115 positions below our authorities below where we need. So constant staffing overtime will go up. If someone's off because they're sick or injured, we have to hire in that position, or we have to close an ambulance in someone's community, or we have to close a fire engine in someone's community. We can't do that.
Right.
So that's why we have that constant staffing. Those are fixed post positions, those 951.
But that money would be going to the new personnel and not that constant staffing.
Correct. As we start hiring and we have that ability to expand our workforce by hiring new bodies, then we can have bodies in those positions instead of hiring for a vacant position.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. And so before I call on Mr. Englander to close, Mr. Rosendahl had requested, Mr. Lima, that you be afforded an opportunity to say a few additional words. So we're going to, I know we're going to speak on items 19 and 20, but we'll afford you the opportunity to speak at this point, and I hope that a lot of what you heard today you find favorable. But anyway, with that, Mr. Lima.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And just like to appreciate this talk of a not a mean-spirited conversation here. And very, very important issues that have been discussed. And number one is public safety is why we're here. And a couple things that I'd just like to bring up in that saying that we're down on deaths and the death toll has been down, and that may be the case. However, we've been very lucky. And first reason why we're down on deaths is our brothers and sisters in the Fire Prevention Bureau at the first line of public safety. They're doing their job, but they have been cut down to the bone, and they're a more of a line function. That in the stations, we've been very lucky because at the line function in the station, our training has deteriorated to nothing. We have one of the most dangerous jobs, professions in the country. And just to be anyway close to being braggadocious that the deaths are down is just, we've been very lucky at the Russian roulette table the last couple of years. Everybody here involved, all the entities. And when I was a young firefighter, approximately 20 years ago in Lemert Park, I went to a fire where we had 3 to 5 children that died behind the barred windows that we couldn't get open due to a delayed response times. And it's things like that. This is about Mrs. Smith, who calls 911. This is about public safety's been in jeopardy for a long time, and I know we're all trying to fix this here together. But our firefighters are working in deteriorated working conditions, doing a good job, not complaining. And I agree with the chief; they do an outstanding job every day. But we appreciate your time. And another thing that doesn't get brought up much is that if you look at all the large municipal fire departments in the country, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, if you take a per capita, in other words, you take the number of firefighters out there on the front line and divide them by the population, we are the smallest per capita fire department in the whole nation, but we generally do the best job. And our members at this point are running on a line where I don't know how, something's going to break soon. So thank you all for helping us attempt to fix this situation.
Well, I think we are committed to do that, and we're trying to come up with ways to provide you with the resources that you need. Mr. Englander, to close.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for all the time and attention, and thank you particularly to the, first and foremost, the commissioners that have really dedicated their expertise, their experience, their time, which has been incredibly valuable in making this city a better place, a safer place. But this is one of the most important things that we do as a city, is provide medical and fire resources. We do have, as you heard, and we all know, the best trained men and women, bar none, in the nation, and I'm confident of that. And as a chair of public safety, I celebrate that often and share it with many. But with that, we also know that they're not experts in everything, and we've heard a lot about that today in terms of data mining. And although Chief Butler, who really is the expert, I think, at data mining, but it's to Chief Cummings that he put those people in place as well and recognizes the experts within his department. But for the first time in a long time, it was the ability to reach out beyond the department and bring in experts. And so I think we've got to applaud. We put him in the hot seat today for a good reason. We're all frustrated, but more importantly, we care about protecting lives, as the chief does in the city of Los Angeles, in this great city, making sure that they have the resources, but that they have an action plan to get there, that they recognize the strengths, the weaknesses of the department, that they can focus on what it's going to take to fix those and put things back on track, and then change the culture of that department. To hear the chief come here today knowing full well the tough questions we're going to be thrown at him, and having the responses with solution, idea, and action plan driven initiatives is what I hope to hear, and it's what we heard today. And so I want to thank you for that. We've come a long way. We got a long way to go. But where I think we're on a track to get there, there's a path. I particularly want to thank Commissioner Scobin as well for working and putting together this task force and working with the department, the city, and so many others. This IDS task force, the IDA task force, is going to be critically the next step for Firestat LA and the culture of the city as we move forward for fighting for the resources for the department and then justifying why we're doing that to the taxpayers. This report, the next step, Mr. President, should go to committee so we can hear more about it in detail. We can look at and walk through all the graphs and get into under the covers of it, if you will, and look at all the charts and under the hood and beyond just kicking the tires. So thank you for that. In terms of the motion, I would recommend that be amended for the 60 days as suggested as well. And with that, knowing full well that it may not necessarily be that full action plan necessarily, but just an overview, as our commission president has stated, that's the right thing to do. There's one thing that we need to couple that with as well. And Mr. Krikorian mentioned the RFP that I believe it's actually going out next week. It was held for a little while, but it's going out, coming back with a lot more detail. That's going to have to be taken into consideration. The findings from that report as well will have to be taken into consideration. We'll look at all those variables, but to just know that we should support moving forward with more planning. But I wanted to thank you for coming here today with your team and presenting all this great information.
And I too want to thank you, Chief, Commissioner, Mr. President. Thank you. We face very serious times. It's going to take serious leadership, and it would appear that we have the individuals that are ready, willing, and able to provide that leadership. So again, thank you so very much for your time. Like Mr. Englander said, we will vote to send this back to committee because there's more work to be done. And I look forward for your report in 60 days. And I think Mr. Labange has a quick amendment.
Instead of 3 to 5, let's go 1 to 3 to 5. Let's see what we're doing in a year from now. Let's really put the pressure on all of us.
I have no problems with that amendment. It's a good idea. In
1
fact,
to 3 to 5.
Some of the members wanted to know why so long. So good amendment, and I accept it.
And Madam Clerk, you have the right verbiage on that? Thank you so much.
She'll fix it, Mr. Labange.
Thank you, President Weston. I'd like to thank the City Council for your continuing support of public safety in the City of Los Angeles. I'd also like to thank the Fire Commission for being here, for the Union President, our new Union President, Frank Lima, and for my entire command staff for their support. And finally, the men and women of the Los Angeles Fire Department who every day, everywhere, provide exceptional public safety, save lives, and save property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we've already fulfilled the public comment on this item, Mr. City Attorney, so that we can move on from this point. So, Madam Clerk, this vote, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay, Mr. Englander, it's back in your capable hands. At the request of Ms. Perry on item 6, if we could vote to reconsider that item. So if we could vote to reconsider item 6, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
And it's my understanding that the request is to continue that until tomorrow, which is what day, Madam Clerk?
December 5th.
December 5th. Okay, also on item 29, if instead of continuing that item to the 11th of December, that item, per Mr. Krikorian, needs to be continued to the 12th. So without objection, that will be the order for the day. Any more business before this committee?
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Well, before this council, consider them posted and referred.
That clears the desk.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas.
23.
Forthwith on
23.
item 23. Or did we already do that? Well, anyway, forthwith on item 23. Announcements. Mr. Laban.
Yeah, Mr. President, this afternoon at the Water and Power Commission, we will have an agenda item over there to salute those members of the Department of Water and Power who answered the call, went to New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut area, and worked with the other utility companies to assist in the tragedy of the storm that hit. So we want to always remember that water and power not only serves Los Angeles, but serves wherever they are to help.
Thank you.
Thank them.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Members, other than that, Mr. Streetcar named Desire, Mr. Jose Huizar.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. That's exactly what I was going to announce. Yesterday, voters in downtown voted for an assessment district that will provide us with $62 million to build a streetcar in downtown L.A. Mr. Zine talked about how he used to ride the streetcar and come down with his mom to go shopping. And it's a great day for the city of L.A. as once again we're investing in our downtown Los Angeles area. Good news all around. We now have to go after some federal money to make this a reality, hopefully break ground in 2014 and have the streetcar up and going in 2016. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, congratulations to you, Mr. Huizar, and congratulations to the city of Los Angeles. Other announcements? Announcements, members. Okay, if we could all rise, if everyone in the council chambers would please rise and be silent for adjourning motions. Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, Mr. President. I just want us to acknowledge World AIDS Day, which was started on December the 1st. As you know, we went through a Holocaust for 10 years, from 85 to 95. And on the very first day, there's what we call AIDS Watch. And my partner, Christopher Lee Blauman, my first partner, is mentioned in the first name. So I say to all those who lost loved ones during that 10-year Holocaust, may they all rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you. Ms. Perry?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Kyung Jae Ju, who is also known as Christina. She spent her early years living in Korea, and after the end of World War II, she immigrated to the United States, hoping to live the American dream and provide a better life for her children. Her story was one of a Korean people's struggle for hope, happiness, and a better life for future generations. She was 87 years old and the grandmother of David Rue, and she will be sincerely missed.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Alex Soteris passed away November 26th. Alex grew up in Malibu, attended Pepperdine University, became a leader in the business community for our city while serving many roles, including president of the Agora, Oak Park, Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce and Calabasas Chamber of Commerce. Passed away from cardiac arrest, well known in the business community and valued for his civic leadership, contributions to political life in the city of Los Angeles. Instrumental in the life and well-being of the Chamber of Commerce, represented, including having served as president from 2000 to 2004, helped to develop it to one of the largest and most influential in the state. Family, friends, and associates were all saddened by his sudden passing. He was a servant and ally to many and a great man to have as a friend. He was a personal friend to myself and many folks of the San Fernando Valley. A private burial will take place today. There will be a public memorial service, which the details will be released later. May he rest in peace, a good friend, Alex Soteris. Survived by his father, Solana, sister, Nicole, aunt, Bilo Bell of New Hampshire. Again, may Alex Soteris rest in peace.
Mr. Koretz.
President, colleagues, I ask you to join me in adjourning in memory of Pastor Emil Frank, the late father of our Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff, Larry Frank. Emil Frank passed away peacefully in his sleep on November 18th at age 92. He was born in Saskatchewan, went on to become the first in his family to graduate from high school. Emil attended Prairie Bible Institute in Alberta and obtained a Master's of Divinity from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Minneapolis. He met and married the love of his life, Muriel Johnson, and they moved to Arkansas, where they served as missionaries at rural schools. Emil later served as pastor of the Sound Beach Community Church on Long Island for 23 years. Emil and Muriel retired to Portland, Maine, and later Gaylord, Michigan. And in retirement, Emil cared for Muriel through her many years with Alzheimer's disease. Emil was known for his games, jokes, love of people, and devout religious faith. To us, he's also known for Larry Frank, who clearly carries on his father's commitment to making this world a better place. Emil is survived by his sons Douglas and Larry and his daughter Colleen Serac and their families, as well as his sister and two sisters-in-law and numerous nieces and nephews. We offer our deep, heartfelt condolences to Larry and his entire family.
Okay, I think Mr. Labange is going to do the last one. Members, there's no more adjourning motions. Mr. Labange.
Mr. President and members, every day is a blessing. And we have people who help us in life who are our friends. And one of my greatest friends is Roy Fitzpatrick, who was my chief of field operations. Roy lived to be 66 years old, but he could have been 166 because he lived life to the fullest. And he was much loved. He grew up across the street from me. And he knew all my brothers, and we were friends. He went to Marshall. I went to Marshall. He was a great baseball player, great basketball player. He worked as a young man in the neighborhood. He worked for the Parks Department in Griffith Park, and then graduated from USC, and later went on to work at the Auto Club for over 30 years. And when we'd see each other, he'd always talk about City Hall politics. He was very much interested in the politics of the city. He had wonderful parents who were both librarians, one at Hollenbeck Middle School in Boyle Heights, the other at John Marshall. His parents met at the Memorial Branch on Olympic Boulevard across from LA High. And believe it or not, his mother told me that all the clerks who worked for the library department, this was in the 1930s, always left to go to Water and Power because they paid 7 cents more an hour. His parents were great people who lived well into their 90s and truly were inspiration. And in the late years, he would always visit his father and talk about City Hall and the civics of life. He had a 30-year career with the Automobile Club as one of their top executives. And right when my opportunity came to replace John Ferraro in the 4th District, Rory had finished his career with the Auto Club and started with me. And just like the Auto Club is service, Rory was service to our constituents. Answer the phone, respond, and lead a team of people who are the great team that we all have in each other. I happen to love my team more because you know how that goes. But Rory was a great asset, and we've got so many calls from our constituents because people love Rory. He started early, and he came in early, and he'd answer the phone, and he'd go out to the people, and he'd talk to them and try to find their solution to their problem. He's much loved. His wife, Donna, of 43 years, his daughter, Amy and Jennifer, and his son-in-law, Marty, and the grandchildren, Gracie. And he loved watching your son, Jack, play baseball, who's now at Glendale High, I believe, throwing strikes for the Dynamiters. So we all have days, and this is a day. On Thursday, we celebrate his life in Griffith Park. Roy Fitzpatrick was loved by people, and to his family around this building, people loved him, and it was like a pinball machine. I talked to everybody I talked to said they were so sorry to hear Rory's passing and how important he was to just be a very good human being. So God bless Roy Fitzpatrick. He will be sorely missed.
Mr. Labange, if I could ask IT, can we pan and get a shot of the Labange staff and family? If we could move the camera.
And if I could tell you, Mr. President, you get that shot. One time, Rory is with my brother Chris. I think they're about 18 or 19, and I'm like 12 or 11. They live across the street in Silver Lake. And we lived in a house that had 57 steps to get up to it, and they lived across the street, and they had 16 steps to get down to their second floor. So they called on the phone, my brother Chris and Rory, and said, "Tommy, come over." So I went over the house, and they were sitting like right there, Mr. President, and the TV was right here. This is before there were clickers. And they said, "Tommy, change the channel." That was the beauty of Rory and all the fun that we had, joking, living, but working hard. God bless Rory Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Garcetti, did you want to speak on the same subject?
Mr. Labange, if you'll just let me for 1 second. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss of the Fitzpatrick family. Rory was a chip off the CD4 block, the Silver Lake block, and I know what it was like for you, Tom, to come to work with your best friend every day. I had the great joy of working with him. He kept the city together. We worked together on the Hollywood secession or anti-secession campaign. Part of the reason the city's together is because of him. And I just want to say, Tom, you made a boy's dream come true coming here and working here. And he was an extraordinary, extraordinary servant. Right. It's a huge loss.
And he had a wonderful sister, Ann, who's survived him, and her husband, Hollis, and kids. And their boy came down and was one of our interns in the office, which was great.
Anyway, you have all our prayers. Members, other adjourning motions? Then this meeting is adjourned.